we have Correctional Health Services on?
Yes, we're on the line.
And DOC?
DOC is here.
Good morning, everyone. Definitely good to see everyone. Just wanted to call the meeting to order. We have confirmed that we have a quorum of members present, and the New York City Board of Correction, February 8th, 2022 meeting is now in session. Again, good morning. For those who don't know me, my name is Julio Medina. Friday, 2/4, I received a call from the mayor's office to sit in as the interim board chair. So this is totally new for me. I ask for your grace and patience as we walk through this agenda today, but most importantly, that we get some of this done. For those who do know me, I've worked at Exodus for the last 23 years. I run a nonprofit that works with women and men being released, as well as being on the preventive side. I've served on the mayor's task force for reentry. I served on the governor's reentry and reintegration committee. I've served on the Littman Commission, and I'm now a proud member of this Board of Corrections. So thank you for this opportunity. And as we move forward, I would first like to get some business out of the way. So let's vote on the draft minutes for November 9th, 2021 board meeting, which the board members, you should have received those minutes. Will a board member move for a vote to approve the January 11th, 2022 meeting minutes? Steve, I see you. Will someone second that motion?
Second.
Felipe? Wonderful. Does any member have any edits or comments on the minutes? All right. Now I call for a vote to approve the January 11th, 2022 minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. And I'll hand it now off to my partner, Amanda.
Morning.
Morning.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
We have several updates this morning. First off, at our last public meeting, the New York County Defenders reported during the public comment period about a food protest that was happening at RNDC. BOC staff investigated the protest, spoke to people in custody, observed Genetech footage, and learned that the men at RNDC were using commissary food as partial replacement of institutional meals, which were being refused, and they did so to protest conditions involving our Board of Correction minimum standards that are unfortunately not unique to RNDC. Our further understanding is the department is investigating an alleged act of violence on a person in custody, which has been the subject of some media attention because the victim has stated that he was part of that food protest. We will have questions for the department later on in our agenda. Next, the board expresses condolences for several deaths of department staff that have happened in the past month. The first of which is Commissioner William Fraser. The commissioner joined DOC in 1978, and he was a COBA delegate, later a Correction Captains Association delegate, and still later a president of the ADW union. He served as a tour commander, an executive officer, a warden, a division chief, a bureau chief, and then chief of department, and eventually commissioner in 2001. And he led the department's response to 9/11. So again, the board expresses condolences for his loss. The department also lost retired corrections officer Dwayne Granger, Presley Crawford, the the father of Captain Johnny Johnson, Correction Officer Ronald John Little, Captain Rodney Alberry, retired, Correction Officer Norca Lisette Jones, Correction Officer Alicia Latouche, Electrician Artie DeCecchi, apologies for that one, Captain Rebecca Marshall, retired, and Correction Officer James Dancy, also retired. And finally, we would like to thank the COBA representative, Ashaki Antoine, for her participation in the board's public comment period at our last meeting and many previous meetings, and her consistent engagement with our staff. And I look forward to meeting with her soon.
Thank you. On February 3rd, 2022, 3 board members and BOC staff met with Commissioner Molina and his staff. The commissioner expressed support for the board's risk management accountability system, known as RMAS, and a plan to implement RMAS in accordance with our rules. We look forward to working together to ensure that the use of punitive segregation ceases and more humane RMAS units are built. This is a historic moment to be able to work together, and we are excited about some of the possibilities that exist. It's imperative that the department work with the board to implement this RMAS system as well, cooperatively, rather than request continuing emergency executive orders.
Under the minimum standards that this board promulgated in June of last year, the department was to end the use of punitive segregation and implement the RMAS system by November of last year. However, citing excessive staff absenteeism and staff shortages to justify a declaration of emergency, the mayor issued an emergency executive order delaying the end of solitary confinement in New York City. The following minimum standards are currently affected still by emergency executive orders. The emergency executive orders suspended the BOC minimum standard relating to the commingling of inmate populations to permit DOC to consider safe housing alternatives for young adults in custody. An EEO provided that DOC may continue placing young adults in the ESH. Another suspended the board minimum standard relating to ESH, the enhanced supervision housing, to permit and only to permit DOC to place young adults in ESH. Another, solely respecting housing area 2B of GRVC, suspended various minimum standards to permit DOC to use that area 2B for special safety and security purposes. And yet another suspended the Board of Corrections minimum standards related to involuntary lock-ins, law library operation and access, the use of restrictive housing, including many aspects of the new RMAS system. The suspended restrictive housing standards relate to pre-hearing detention, use of punitive segregation, case management upon placement into the restrictive housing, due process and procedural justice requirements for disciplinary RRUs, and the non-individualized use of restraints, which would include restraint desks. And another, in light of the suspension of the minimum standards around RMAS, it clarified that the old minimum standards related to enhanced supervision housing and limitations on the use of punitive seg that were promulgated in 2015 were not repealed by promulgation of RMAS because that was suspended, but rather they are still in effect. So the ESH and the PS minimum standards are currently in effect, except that DOC may continue putting young adults in ESH. Any minimum standards not modified or suspended specifically by an executive order remain in effect. The next update, we've asked both the department and CHS to tell us about their efforts regarding COVID in today's agenda. And we will post a full presentation complete with key data points and trends on housing area capacity and testing on the board's website after this meeting. It is quite a long slide deck, and I believe that CHS has its own, so I'm not going to go through it with you right now, but it will be on our website right after the meeting. And I can summarize quickly some of the salient statistics about COVID and the jail census. On February 2nd, there were 5,551 people in jail, marking an 8% decrease compared to the September peak census. And on that date, CHS reported that there were 1,196 people in jail who had or had recovered from COVID, and 28 people had active COVID infections. As of that same date, there had been 556 COVID cases among CHS staff and 2,828 COVID cases among the DOC staff. The first wave of the COVID pandemic prompted coordinated efforts to rapidly reduce the jail population, and by April of 2020, the population fell to a historic low of 3,832. The trend then reversed, and the jail reached a new high last month, down 26% compared to December when there were, oh, I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong one. Apologies. The trend reversed. The jail reached a new high last month, peaking at 6,095 on September 14th, an increase compared to what had happened back in 2020. And we're glad to see that that the calls for decarceration were listened to early on in the pandemic. But to repeat the figure that I mentioned up at the top, there were 5,551 people in jail at the beginning of this month. And we believe that additional decarceration efforts are urgently needed.
Thank you, Amanda. At this time, I'd like to welcome Commissioner Molina to feel free to address the board with any opening remarks. I had an opportunity to meet Commissioner Molina on a few separate occasions and just looking forward to figuring out next steps. So Commissioner Molina, would you mind opening with a few opening remarks?
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Medina and the members of the board. I'm happy to be meeting with you all again this morning. I want to first, before I go into my prepared remarks, thank you on behalf of the department for your condolences for our retired and active staff that have passed away recently. I'd also like to share retired Chief of Department Larry Davis passed away last Friday. He served in our department for over 30 years, and 31 years to be exact with the department. He also has another generation of the Davis family still working with the department. So just wanted to share that news with the board as well. At last month's public meeting, I was just a few days into my appointment, and I took the opportunity to share with you who I am and where my values lie. I spent my first month in office engaging with staff, people in custody, advocates, and other stakeholders to assess the significant issues facing this agency. Now, I'd like to show you how I intend to create a correctional system that we're proud of, that provides people in custody with opportunities for rehabilitation, and provides the support and resources our staff need to best perform their duties. For me, programming is imperative. Everyone benefits when people in custody are given the tools they need to have less contact with the justice system in the future. I intend to focus on increasing programming and bringing in providers and services that are targeted to the needs of the population. Already, I've made changes to our policy that will allow more credible messengers into our facilities to engage with the people in custody in a meaningful, effective way. We know that education is also empowering. I plan to increase access and opportunities to education to align with the value that I've spoken to you all with. I've also spoken with the DOE Chancellor to discuss my commitment and invited him to tour the East River Academy to see how we can continue to strengthen our education services. Further, I'd like to bring in nonprofits who can support with additional educational services, such as tutoring, college preparation, and more. Flooding our facilities with meaningful, targeted programming and educational services will decrease idleness and in turn reduce violence. More than that, it will support the well-being of those in our care and their hope for the future. We cannot succeed in these endeavors without appropriately supporting our staff. They are our most vital resource and frontline leaders in our efforts for reform. We need to acknowledge that the last 2 years have been really difficult for our staff, who stepped up when the city needed them most to do an extremely challenging job. It is essential that we now focus on staff wellness and organizational health and invest in training and mentorship opportunities to ensure that we are giving them the tools they need to succeed in their work. To that end, we've set up a team of uniformed staff to call staff who are out sick and make plans to get them back to work fit and healthy. An additional team checks in on staff in the facilities who have returned to duty. I see this on the ground effort as a credible messenger program of sorts for our staff to engage with one another and foster positivity and mutual support. Our recent recruit class serves as a beacon as we look forward towards the future of the department, and I am pleased to welcome them on board. They join the ranks of many dedicated members of service and will reduce the need for 12-hour shifts, which has been an incredible burden on our staff. Lastly, I want to provide you with an update on our progress on de-escalation units and the implementation of the risk management accountability system. As I mentioned last month, we are moving ahead with de-escalation implementation as feasible based on our evolving staffing and COVID situation. Since last month's meeting, I'm proud to announce that we were able to open de-escalation units at Rose M. Singer Center and the Otis Bantam Correctional Center. In the coming weeks, we hope to open additional units as staffing levels permit, and we will keep the board informed of our progress. I greatly appreciate the board's patience and partnership as my team and I worked over the past month to put together a vision for RMAS that I believe will not only meet the legal requirements of the board's rule, but will go above and beyond to meet the spirit of the rule. We've identified GRVC as a single facility that best supports the RMAS program across all levels of the RMAS housing spectrum. We're working on construction updates to enhance the housing areas designated for RMAS, including removing restraints from the areas and creating dedicated program and counseling space within the units. My programs team developed a comprehensive plan for both individualized and congregate programming that will progress with the individual through the RMAS levels. This program plan is aimed at behavioral modification for individuals living in these areas. We have already revised over 50 departmental policies to align with RMAS rules, and we have begun training staff. While we are moving full steam ahead with RMAS implementation, there is still significant work to be done. I am committed to seeing it through. I understand the great amount of work the board put into writing this rule, and I'm looking forward to working with the DOC team and this board to bring it to life and ensure its success. While I require additional time to see the vision through, I'm confident that the reforms we are pushing will serve as a model for restorative housing across the country. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to share my updates with you. Changes have started. It's going to take more time than just myself and our dedicated staff to improve the lives of individuals in our care that are in great need. We all have a part to play in the future of this agency, and I look forward to continuing to work in close partnership with this board. My team and I look forward to answering your questions and discussing these subjects in greater detail as we move through today's agenda. Thank you.
Commissioner Molina, thank you so much for the update. Let me take an opportunity to ask board members if they have any questions for Commissioner Molina. At this time, doesn't look like they do. Can you talk about some of the recent, and I'm not sure if you mentioned it, right, the department addressing the recent food protests that took place in minimum standards compliance?
Sure. So what I will share with the board is that the gentlemen that were in RDC really were partaking in what I would describe as a collective grievance. They did have some points that were very, very valid. The warden has had multiple meetings with the group to discuss with them and address a lot of the needs that they wanted addressed. I myself have also met with those gentlemen as well to address their concerns. Chief, have any more updates on RNDC?
Yes, good morning. There were 4 units that participated in the grievance regarding conditions at RNDC. As the Commissioner mentioned, the warden and other executive staff members visited that unit and listened to their grievances. Those persons, they decided not to eat the food that was supplied to them by the department, and instead chose to eat items that were brought from commissary. Some of their grievances were regarding COVID and being quarantined for extended periods of time, access to services, poor physical living conditions. The warden continues to visit those units, and her executive team, maintenance, also made any necessary repairs and continues to address issues as pertains to the physical plant of the unit. With regards to those taking place, there have not been any other further grievances from those units regarding the conditions within their housing unit and the access to services.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Jackie?
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, Commissioner and team. Commissioner, I am heartened to hear that your team has been busy at work and has developed a comprehensive plan for robust programming in the jails. Could you share that plan with the board?
Sure. So we have asked external providers to come back, and they've been on the ground, I want to say maybe almost 2 weeks now. I'll let DC Torres expand on some of those programming items.
Sure. Good morning. All the best to you, including Chair Medina.
Morning.
Good morning. If you allow me, I think I would like to share with you a comprehensive summary of the services that we have been providing, most recently as a response to our COVID uptick. I think that our division has been able to follow an internal protocol that had been established when the pandemic just came to be a semi-quasi-new normal back in March 2020. The Commissioner has already shared with you some of his vision regarding programming, but I think it's only fair I give you an update on where programming has been, since we had to ask our external partners and volunteers to post services back in December 2022. And so our counseling staff, and the counseling staff is a robust unit. It happens to be one of our largest units. In the title of Associate Correctional Counselors, Level 1 and 2, roll out what is known as a social service request slips in housing areas that were in an AE status or exposed, and in recent times where we had no assigned B officers. Those counseling staff members were able to provide one-on-one services as well as social services. Those program counselors who have been hired to provide services to our young adult population continue to engage our young adult populations in group sessions within the housing areas, as well as afford one-on-one counseling. Our unit assigned to arts continue on unit services, and as a matter of fact, we should highlight to you that for the first time in the history of the DOC, on January 12, 2022, the Veterans Unit was able to do a live simulcast of a Broadway show that our veterans enjoyed. They were seriously engaged in the entire performance, were able to pose questions, and this first ever simulcast was aside from being the first, was originally rolled out by our new commissioner, who visited both participants and staff at the unit. Our recreation team, since October 4th of 2021, has been doing daily alignments with our recreation supervisors at the commands to ensure we are able to provide recreation services to all housing areas. Our team, of course, and especially in response to the last outbreak, could not bring our population to congregate settings. And so they were in the house or houses providing small group activities, board and card games, ping pong, puzzles, brain teasers, chess, and checkers. And so we're looking forward to that moment when we are able to commingle in order to resume our basketball tournaments and all other activities. Allied counseling, our law library staff rolled out once again their request slips for those housing areas where we could not have staffing present. However, I have to emphasize that anyone who needed to have access to a discovery or anyone who needed to meet with a legal coordinator was provided services at the law library when the command was able to provide an escort. And so I also need to emphasize the fact that we have been able to afford the persons in custody with our tablets, which we continue to enhance as time progresses, and we will continue to enhance and add different capabilities in the near future. I will be remiss if I forget about a new team that has been assigned to our division, and that is the unit of chaplaincy. Commissioner Molina asked me on January 5th if I would be happy to take and onboard the chaplains. It is something that I've done immediately. These chaplains continue to meet persons in need of counseling, persons in need through our hotline, a hotline that had been established as a way for anyone who needed to have the attention of a chaplain to request that service and for the chaplain to actually go into the housing unit and meet with them. As you heard Commissioner Molina say a few minutes ago, he has already engaged in conversations with the chancellor, and we are committed as a department to continue to have access to education by anyone who is 18 to 21, but also exceed that as a mandate to afford services to the adult population. And so on January 3rd, our partners from the Department of Education returned to in-person services, and they have obtained more than our support, and that will be something that I'll be happy to respond to later on. As a department, we have been able to establish what we know as schoolhouses, and we have afforded a series of incentives associated to attendance and participation in school. On January 20th, 2022, the commissioner was able to participate in our quarterly call with our providers, where we had over 100 providers. Not only was he able to provide the vision for the department, he was also able to, one, share with them the vision for programs, and two, announce the return of the providers on January 24th, 2022. Throughout this period, I also need to share with you that our division has been committed in onboarding new staff members that will be assigned to RMAS. We have onboarded 11 program counselors, we have onboarded 3 social workers, and 5 intervention specialists. I don't want to fool you. Our division has also been impacted by COVID. We had over 74 staff members who in this last resurgence actually fell ill. And we still were able to provide as much coverage as possible. And so if I share with you where is programs today, I should highlight the following. Our DOC staff members have continuously afforded services in all housing areas that they have access to. Between January 24th through the present, we have been onboarding our external providers. As a matter of fact, our volunteer and service provider unit began the vetting process on January 21st, 2022, meaning that we started welcoming back any of those staff members to our external providers or volunteers who at the time of the interruption in December had to be put on hold. Our workforce development unit has restarted certificates and certification courses throughout the commands. I'm happy to share with you that on January 27th, through one of our colleges, we were able to restart a remote learning. And on February 1st, we brought back one of our college providers and started in-person education at VCVC. Our division continues to support the department's efforts in affording haircuts. We are also doing the preliminary work because our department has been funded through the efforts and partnerships with a provider to specific grants that would allow us the opportunity to create child-friendly environments in our male facilities. And so when you hear the commissioner say what his vision is for programs has not been asleep. And so we know we still need to have more work done to meet his vision for programming, and we will continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, DC Torres. Let me hit Bobby and then Freya.
Thank you very much, Julio. And welcome again, Commissioner and all. I was present at the meeting last week with you, and I really appreciate the time that you gave us. And certainly, I know that the board members who were there walked away with a new sense of possibilities. And we're very, very, very pleased with your endorsement of the of RMAS. I want to ask you questions about problems rather than solutions right now. On September 2nd, the mayor issued another executive order. These executive orders flow through from the department through City Hall, and the executive order says, whereas excessive staff absenteeism among correction officers and supervising officers has contributed to a rise in unrest and disorder, creates a secondary risk to necessary maintenance and delivery of sanitary conditions, access to basic services, including showers, meals, visitation, religious services, commissary, recreation, and prompt processing and intake. And these shortages are affecting health operations, including the availability of escorts to bring patients to the clinic and of DOC personnel to staff the clinics. And as we're all are aware, you know, there is litigation in Bronx courts right now on the Agnew case, where the department has said that they're unable to meet the standards that they committed to. So I know that you have had a press conference saying that where you said that the table of present officers is increased by 1,000. Is that number relative to December, or if you looked at the number in September of 2021, would you see a similar number to what you have now? And I would like to know, are you providing recreation to every, you know, are there staffed housing areas? No B officer? Are there serious problems with access to healthcare because of inadequate escort officers and inadequate support for the clinic? You've only been here for a few weeks, and these problems are not of your creation, but they were created. They weren't. They didn't spring from Zeus's head. But I like your comments, on the current state of the crisis. With all due, kudos for your plans and your commitments going forward.
Thank you, Dr. Cohen, for your question. So I'll just say that, there's no perfect science to determine the number of staff that we need. And while COVID is still with us, we need to be able to have flexibility in order to respond to emerging crises as they come. It's important to understand that our overall staffing numbers is only one part of the equation. Right now, our housing areas are not consolidated, as we needed to open up additional housing areas to deal with not only COVID positive housing, but at the time AE housing areas in response to the Omicron variant. These emergency orders are meant to be temporary, and we're only in a unique situation, as is the rest of the city and the nation. We're still dealing with a pandemic, and we need the executive orders to allow us to respond dynamically and with some flexibility in case another variant emerges. But despite the executive orders, we are still making progress. Like DC Torres has stated, our external program providers have returned to the jails, and we plan also, I'll announce now, to return to in-person visits on February 9th. We've implemented some de-escalation units in multiple facilities in 2, and we continue to work towards implementing what you referenced earlier, RMAS. While I understand that we would like to put COVID behind us, the reality is that it is still very much with us, especially in our jails, which are close quarters, congregate settings. We continue to closely monitor CDC correctional guidelines, which are different than those for the general public, and we do not indicate that we should treat this as just a pandemic that's behind us, right? Because it's been ever changing over the last 2 years. And our guidelines will change, and we'll evaluate and make changes in tandem with the recommendation of health authorities and our partners at CHS. As it relates to staffing levels, I am happy to report that we have had more than 1,000 uniformed officers return to work since January 1st. We've been able to transition several of our facilities back to 8-hour tours, 5 to be exact, giving staff in those facilities much needed reprieve and moving us closer to really normal operations. Since I stepped into this role, I have personally attended several town halls so that I can engage with staff directly to address their questions and their concerns. We have built a team, as I stated earlier, of uniformed staff to call other uniformed staff that are out sick for longer than 3 days to see what support they may need to come back to work. We recently had a graduating class of 75 new officers come to the department this month. So the most recent graduating class, we're hopeful that they will also help to alleviate some of the pressure of overall staffing shortages. One of the first things I did when I stepped into this role was also revise our sick policy. As you know, we briefly discussed that during our last board meeting. The previous policy was keeping many officers out longer than they needed to be. This is a way that we can take a person that just needs a day or two to recover, and they can return to work instead of having them wait to be seen by a health management division doctor 5 days later for something that really doesn't require to be seen by a physician. However, I also do understand that there is a need to have accountability in these policies. Historically, this department has not adhered to the practice of medically separating staff who are just quite frankly unable to work for physical or other health-related issues. And this is an area in which I intend to focus on moving forward. I believe that these measures combined with real and much needed effort to provide our staff with the support that they need to do a very tough job will get our staffing numbers back to where we need them to be to keep them here in the long run.
I saw Freya, and then let me.
Thank you.
And then Steve.
Thank you, Commissioner, and to your team. I think we've, in particular, really appreciated what's clear is from your dedication to moving forward with the RMAS model. So I just wanted to point that out, as well as your focus on staffing, and that's one area that I have a bunch of questions about. I also wanted to thank DC Torres for the really comprehensive overview of the programming. It's clear that that's an area where you're putting a lot of focus, and that looks very, very promising and important. So thank you. On the staffing, last time we had asked for some information about some of the numbers, number out sick, AWOL, et cetera. And understanding that that was just a snapshot in time, wanted to see if we could get a snapshot in time that's current. So last time, as of January 19th, there were 1,644 out sick. What is that figure today?
Hold on 1 second. I know that we've seen our average sick rates. From those who have been out sick between 2 days and 30 days has come down because we've been directly engaging staff that are out sick. Let me see if we can pull up the overall sick numbers from today. I believe they're below 1,600, but let me just confirm that. Chief, do you have a number or?
Yes, February 1st through February 2nd, our average daily total uniform staff that was out sick was at 1,434.
Okay. And given that so much has happened over the past couple of months that it impacts the sick rate, it would be helpful to get just the the number for yesterday, whatever the closest day is that's available. And then I have a few other questions.
And then, Freya, we have numbers from February 6th, and our number on February 6th was 1,484.
Okay, so that's a really great downward trend. It seems like then the 1,000 who've returned is not a net 1,000 in a reduction of the sick rate, but people who've come back, but in the meantime, where people are going out, but you are headed in the right direction. Is that basically correct?
I would say that's correct, and I think even our new sick, right, with somebody calling out, we've seen those averages trending down as well.
And then what about the AWOLs? Last time, as of January 19th, there were 46 AWOL, but only 1 suspension for AWOL. What do those figures look like now?
We'd have to get back with you to give you an AWOL number. I don't have that number off the top of my head as it is today. I will share with you that there is a disciplinary process for staff who are found to be AWOL, and we utilize those tools to hold staff accountable.
Okay, great. Data on the AWOL and the discipline would be very helpful. And then just a couple of other figures related to how the absences are impacting the staff who are out in the jails. So as of that same date, there were 32 staff performing cross tours and 38 unstaffed posts. Do you have current figures for those?
Yeah, so on-staff post figures, I don't have. We'll get back to you on that. What I will say is that, yes,
good morning. I'll just give an update with posts that were deemed to be unstaffed as of today at 0400 hours. As of 0400 hours within the department, there were a total of 11 unstaffed posts. So as the Commissioner has stated during his testimony with regards to people returning to work and being able to provide services to the person in custody, we continue to operate our emergency operations center 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, whereas it is supervised by the duty chief in my office, and whereas the needs of the facility requires additional staff, we deploy staff from headquarters to abate those unstaffed posts. I just want to, for clarity, state that at 400 hours when we have 11 unstaffed posts, that is what is being reported by the facility. And as a part of the redeployment strategy, we deploy staff members to those locations to take those assigned posts, resulting in 0 unstaffed posts. This provides some context around what has been happening. On yesterday, we were able, with regards to deployment, the department had 0 unstaffed posts as it pertains to persons in custody. So we've seen great improvement with regards to unstaffed posts.
Thank you so much, Chief. I just have a couple others, then I'll pass it over to my colleagues. First, I wanted to commend the Commissioner also for the comments about medical separation and dealing with these long-term sick issues in that way. So that is a really critical tool, and thank you for focusing on that. And then finally, you had mentioned the new classes, and that's excellent that a good size cohort has started. I know that you have many others in the pipeline who have passed the exam and have been going through the screening process. When is your next class going to start, and do you have a sense of how large that class is going to be?
Well, we currently have a class right now, which I believe has 54 recruits in it. Don't know off the top of my head when they're going to be graduating, but we can get you that graduation date. Our applicant investigation unit continues to vet applicants for the possibility of an upcoming class, which we will provide updates with the board as we get dates to figure out when we may have another academy class.
Thank you. Felipe?
Thank you, Julio, Chair. Hi, Commissioner. Hi, Deputy Commissioner Torres. I'm really glad that you're focusing on the well-being of the staff and the folks that we take care of at the Department of Corrections. And Deputy Commissioner Torres, can you talk a little bit more about maybe 6 months ago, or maybe a little bit later, before that, you guys began working in co-designing a program for young adults between officers, staff, and young adults. And I was really impressed and moved by the use of data walks and transparency to get both of them working together in the design and the development of a new set of units. Is that working continuing, or how's it going? Can you give me an update?
Sure. Good morning, Board Member Franco. Thank you for that question. You are correct. I think that the model that you are alluding to is what we internally know as Building 3, where we have invested a great deal of time in creating a complete different communication relationship between the officers selected and assigned to that housing area, as well as the kids who are selected to go into that housing area. Our commitment to that model continues to be supported by Commissioner Molina. In fact, we have 4 housing areas that have been rolled out with the support of the entire command, specifically the leadership at RNDC. We are currently in internal conversations with our financial division because there were certain things that needed to be put on hold temporarily as we transfer from one internal leadership to another leadership. I mean, listen, financially is not going to give us the approval to go and spend on X amount of funds without having the new commissioner come in and completely vet it. But we are continuing that model, and we'll be more than happy to provide you and the members of the Young Adult Task Force with further information when we meet next week.
Thank you. And again, you know that in the past, The NYC Foundation and other local foundations have supported the work, so please let me know if you need further support. The other question is regarding education. We are, as Jackie mentioned, we are very glad that there's a refocus on education. Can you talk about attendance? I mean, the few times that I've been there recently, even though you guys are moving to make it a priority, the attendance is poor or none. How is it today?
Okay, so attendance continues to increase. I love that question, and please, with permission to anyone here in the room as well as you, I would like to slow down this conversation and give you a full overview on where we are with education services. Access to educational services has seriously been impacted by our staffing crisis. And so what we have done is go back and think outside the box, which is back in 2016, 2017, we had done a phenomenal model at GMDC when current Assistant Chief Lemon was there as warden. The model back then was known as Success House. In this case, for now, until the kids select an appropriate name, we have rolled out 4 dedicated housing areas that on a daily basis are escorted into the school to receive mandated educational services. What does that do for us? Well, number one, we get a bunch of kids who are driven in obtaining either their high school diploma and or their equivalency. Number two, we're able to take those housing area officers who provide security and support, we're able to have them escort the young adults into the school, remain there for security purposes, and then turn around and escort them back to their housing area where they are working closely with one of our external providers who has an existing and a track record on working with young adults. That's one. Number two, we have already started a snack incentive at all of our school settings on the island, meaning kids who go into the school are able to have a snack at the end of their day, but they're also able to receive breakfast on the school floor. And it is a different set of breakfast adhering to the nutritional guidelines, and they always look forward to that. Currently, we're working with the DOE board members, Franco, because this February 2nd, with the DOE support, we have been able to roll out a second interval. What we mean by that is that you have a group of kids going into the school area in the morning and a second group of kids going into the afternoon session. Something else that we have been working closely with the Department of Education, and I know that with the Commissioner's permission, I'll be able to share with you, is that we really want to give the kids a different set of uniform to attend school. We want that, we need it. And so there have been some hiccups, you know, that there's some specific shortage of deliveries and production out there. If we look for a specific color, they're not, you know, there's shortage of those colors. And so what we want to do is give them a uniform that they will be using to go to school. We are taking it a step further. We're going to be working closely with our uniform members. We've already begun the conversations because we want to give the kids 3 separate uniforms. We want to give them one for the daily routine, one for school, and one for recreation. I know that in doing that model that I described to you for the schoolhouses, these schoolhouses are also being infused with other type of activities, with other type of games that are for them to have access to after school. I don't know if that answers your question, Franco, but I'll be more than happy to provide more information.
Thank you, Torres, and thank you to everyone for their commitment to education. But if you could provide to the board whenever we meet attendance numbers, that would be very helpful.
I'll be more than happy to turn around and have the DOE come prepared to give you a breakdown.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Steve, thank you.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Good, excellent. First of all, I want to say to everybody, the discussion we're having is quite different, in my opinion, and I'm enjoying the back and forth and the things that have been said. What I want to know, and forgive me if I missed it because I was a little bit in and out earlier with the ability to hear everything. Where do we stand now with COVID vaccines? And you can approach that by subgroups or in general. Where do we stand? And again, forgive me if you have already said that today, but I didn't hear it. And I believe of all the things we're discussing right now, that might be one of the most important. My sense is that everybody else, schools, you name it, where the city has the ability, we are getting people vaccinated. And that may be the most important thing we're doing. I'm not clear on what we're doing with officers, with inmates, etc.
To speak to the uniform staff regarding vaccination, and then I think regarding to those that are in our custodial care, CHS should probably speak to that issue. Chief?
Yes, good morning. With regards to uniform staff being vaxxed, our data reports that there's at least 85% of our uniform staff members who have provided documentation to the department as regards to receiving their vax. On December 1st, of course, we had a mandate that all of our staff members would have to be vaxxed or would have to request a reasonable accommodation. Those members who were granted a reasonable accommodation have to prescribe to weekly testing prior to entering our facilities. There are members with regards to the vax mandate who did not provide documentation, who were put on leave of absence without pay. Our last data supports that number as of early February was at a little below 100.
Just wanted to interrupt just to say that the data that you'd provided to the board, I think, showed that in January of the people in custody, the vaccination rate fluctuated between 45 and 46%. And the share of people in custody who'd been completely vaccinated was between 38 and 39% approximately. Are those in keeping with your understanding?
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, Chief.
CHS is going to respond to that.
Yeah, hi, good morning. It's Patsy Yang. Thanks, Amanda. Those numbers are correct in one way, another way to look at it for people who are in custody, that of those people who are eligible for their second shot, 82% have completed vaccination, compared to 39 if you just took the general population who was there but not yet eligible because of timing for their completed vaccination. That helps. So 46% of persons in custody who are eligible for a shot have a shot, and 82, 46 is how you were counting it, but 82% actually have completed their vaccination series at the time that they were eligible.
Thank you.
Yep.
Bobby?
Commissioner, and Stooks. It would be very helpful to the board, and we have requested it, for us to understand the situation of the department. If you would provide us on a daily basis with the information that we continuously ask for about staffing, how many people are present, how many people are absent, and the reasons why each of them are absent. I believe you get a spreadsheet with that kind of information every day. Certainly, the previous commissioner did, and I'm sure you have that and more. Could you please provide us with that data on a daily basis so we can understand what the staffing implications are in terms of program delivery? I would also ask if one of the mayoral actions, and I think also by order of the court, was to review your staffing pattern, your entire staffing pattern, and that order was begun, I think, in around the summer, around September, sometime after May. And it was supposed, I had been told it was supposed to be due this month. Could you let us know what the status of that project is? And those are the two questions. Provide us with the data on daily, and what is the status of the, I forget the name of those kinds of studies where you just review each post and the needs of the department and try to align them differently.
Thank you, Dr. Cohen, for the question. I'm going to yield to our general counsel to respond.
Hi, Dr. Cohen, Asim Rafan. Good morning. With respect to the data requests we received from the board, some specific requests and a variety of details regarding that daily staffing data. We're reviewing that request, and we'll be getting back to the board staff directly on that.
Thank you.
With respect to the staffing analysis that you were referring, this is in the Nunez matter in federal court. The court monitor has retained an expert consultant to do a staffing analysis throughout the department. That consultant has been coming to the department, meeting with supervisors, doing his own intake and review for his study. We don't know the final date of when that will be released. He's doing the work. We've been talking with the monitor about that work, and we hope that the monitor will be ready soon with that staffing analysis so we can review it and see what it recommends. But that's really in control of the monitor team. It's the release date is not something that we would have direct information on. Thank you.
I appreciate that, and I think it's very important. I mean, while we have all of these discussions, we should keep in mind, and I know the commissioner is keeping it in mind, I haven't talked to him, but I'm sure he is, that the staffing levels in New York City are very, very high compared to any place else in the country. And I'm not asking to have a decrease in staff, but a reallocation of people who are not in direct contact with incarcerated people is very important. And Commissioner, you described how you were going to do that in RMAS in terms of the number of staff, and I was very, very pleased to hear that, and hope that this staffing analysis will give you more flexibility with the staff that you have.
Thank you.
Does any other board members have any other questions they'd like to ask? Commissioner Molina, I just want to thank you. To be able to work with you, this was not an adversarial conversation. It sounds great to see the transformative approach you and your team have taken to change culture that quickly just talks about your own leadership. So grateful to be a part and help in this transformative process. I'll move on to Amanda at this point.
I think that we may have more from Commissioner Molina on specific plans he has with regard to RMAS. Is there anything else you wanted to present on that?
Sure. I mean, I could just briefly talk about, just reinforce from our conversation last week with some of the boards that we're committed to implementing RMAS and ending the use of the department's current restrictive housing model and we are working in good faith to implement a system that meets the spirit of the rule and acts as a model, really, what we think could be a model for the rest of the nation. Some of the approaches that we've implemented in ESH housing areas, which will allow us to really smooth out any wrinkles and be prepared to hit the ground running when RMAS is implemented. Executive Director Nell McCarty has really been one of the leads when we look at what type of programming we want to do in RMAS, and I think it would be good to hear from her so she can share with you some of what our plans are regarding the programming model we're going to be approaching at RMAS. Executive Director.
Thank you so much. So we've really been able to spend the last 8 to 9 months evaluating how we want programs to look in RMAS with a behavior modification focus. And that has required for us to create an internal, very collaborative, multidisciplinary team that involves staffing in the titles of program counselors who will be focused and stationed on housing units, providing support alongside uniformed staff to people in custody, as well as group programming and one-on-ones. We will have social workers who will be following clients as they advance through the levels and transition back to general population. We will have staff in the role of intervention specialists who will be intervening, holding restorative circles, and providing de-escalation support to people in custody. We will also be working with our partners, our community partners in these housing units as they provide group programming, as they provide transition and reintegration services to people in custody, as well as credible messengers who will also assist and intervene when incidents happen in these types of housing units. So we've really tried to take a collaborative approach alongside our uniform partners, training our uniform partners throughout the month of December on what programs will look like so that they can anticipate and work with our team as well.
And I just also think it's important to reinforce that the model of RMAS that we're coming up with will have its own leadership structure, right? So a separate deputy warden in command. It will be a self-sustaining sort of management team from the officers all the way up to the uniform leadership. Even though it's going to be housed in GRBC, think of it as like if you would have a charter school within a larger public school. It's going to be independent of GRBC to make sure that those that are going through the different levels are getting the support that they need.
Could the department describe in more detail what the plan is physically for the RMAS housing areas, what they will look like, and how much time out of cell in a day room you would expect the inmates, the people in custody to have?
Sure, I'll let Stephen Kaiser go into the details of that.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, board members. This is Stephen Kaiser, Assistant Commissioner of Strategic Initiatives. Thank you for that question. It's an important one. The intention and the vision for RMAS is to create a more holistic approach to restorative management of this population. And so in line with the programmatic objectives laid out by E.D. McCarty, the plan is for the physical layout of the units to very much be an extension of that model. So what we're looking at is open day room formats. The best example would be just a regular GP unit with tables in an open day room. There is no intention to have individual day rooms or quads or restraint desks, but to manage the population through lower counts and higher staffing ratios. Additionally, in the units, we're planning to include video conferencing for court appearances, as well as attorney teleconferences, as well as a televisit space for connecting with family members in this technological era. Likewise, space for a law library, and additionally for counseling space and additional program space where available. So again, the intention is for the environment to be as normal in a sense as possible and conducive to the programming and the counseling objectives laid out by E.D. McCarty.
And at what point will you be able to be in compliance with the minimum standards around RMAS?
July 1 of this year.
Are there any questions?
Just one more. Could we hear about your plans for the NYC RMAS current utilization of for restrictive housing?
I mean, NIC, as you may have been aware, was identified as a place to actually operationalize RMAS. As you know, I think all of you have visited NIC, it really was not conducive to trying to achieve the spirit of the board rules, to have the RMAS level 1 units there at NIC. I don't think it provided the intention of congregate interaction, not only with the incarcerated population with each other, but the importance of their interaction with programmatic social worker staff, as well as our uniform staff, right, to have really meaningful human interaction with those that are trying to provide them services. That was something that, from my point of view, could not be achieved at NIC in any real meaningful way. So we're moving away from using NIC, and that's why we're moving the whole RMAS model to one facility, and it's going to be housed within GRVC.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions from our board? Thank you again, DOC Commissioner, for your insight, and for all that you're doing to really transform Rikers and look at, and allow this to lead the country, to be having these conversations around Rikers and some of the stuff that's happening here. It's not us as New Yorkers, and I am excited about the many possibilities that exist under your leadership. With that said, I want to pass it back to Amanda as we end our section with DOC.
And we would ask DOC to remain in the meeting, so that when we come around to the portion of the agenda that has to do with deaths, you're available to answer questions too. But we'll now turn to the health issues described on the agenda. Would the Correctional Health Services please make any preliminary comments that you may have prepared?
Hi, I guess this is Patsy Yang. Thank you. I think we wanted to give the board sort of an update on the state of the system in terms of COVID. We did have a couple of slides, not a full deck, but I don't know if the plan was to show that. I just wanted to give the board a sense of where we sit right now with Omicron. We are certainly in the downside of what appears to be our fourth wave. It is not as high as, I don't know if we've got graphs or not to show. Somebody show that? Not as high as the first wave in 2020, but it was significant, more so than the second and third with Omicron. We are, again, on the downside of that. We have in the past surpassed the city's positivity rate, but we have dropped back down again. The numbers of persons who are with confirmed COVID or in quarantine has been dropping. One of the graphs that I had hoped to show was to really impress upon the board the challenges that we faced with our partners in the Department of Correction over these last 2+ years, compared particularly even to what the city experienced, not only in the rates of positivity and the numbers of cases, but that compounded by the nature of the environment and the congregate setting of a carceral environment. As the commissioner said, COVID is not gone, but even though we are on a downside, we remain vigilant about this very wily virus. Our staff are at this point 100% fully vaccinated. The state did recently issue a new mandate for healthcare workers to be boosted. We have until mid-February to come into compliance with everybody else, all the other healthcare workers in the state of New York. So we are working diligently with our staff to achieve that mandate. We continue to offer vaccination to persons who are in custody, as I noted earlier. Of persons who are currently in custody who are eligible for the vaccination, 82% are fully vaccinated. 43% of those are boosted, which is actually higher than the booster rate in the community at this point in time, or even among our staff. About 100% of our patients who are 70 years of age or older are fully vaccinated. They are particularly at-risk population that we care about. And we are working with the department, again, still with our cornerstones that we implemented in 2020 to manage the transmission and the disease. These are really cohorting and quarantine, testing and vaccination. We are nonetheless, while maintaining surveillance about the virus and managing the transmission, are adapting to the cadences of the virus as we have in the last 2 years, working internally within CHS and with our partners in the department to really take advantage of what we hope will be a bit of a lull, to focus on some of the basic and core services that were somewhat eclipsed by the focus and the urgency of COVID. And that's really where we're focused in what we hope will be a little bit of a break that everybody needs and wants. I think that's about it.
Thank you. Thank you. And our team over here is able to load your slides if that's what you would like us to do. Or we
for
can
the
look at
visual,
the web.
yeah, visual effect. I can flash through it really quickly since
Sure.
just you can.
It's not me. It's someone who's better at technology than me by far.
So you can basically skip that. This is basically the 7-day positivity rate in the jails. That first very high peak was the first the first wave, and you can see that we hit an 82%. That was in early April 6th or so of 2020. The city reached 68%. Again, we were 82%. You can see a little bump of the second wave, the third wave, and that's Omicron to the far right, where we exceeded the city's rate. So if you can go to the next slide. Sorry, you'll see us compared to the city, which I'm trying to, just to give people a sense, the blue line is the in-jail 7-day positivity, and the orange is the New York City 7-day positivity. And we pretty much trended along with the city. We exceeded the city's positivity rates. I understand that this is obviously a function also of testing, but to add to the complication of that is that we did have a detained population in a congregate carceral setting that really presented additional challenges in terms of the ability to quarantine and physically distance and keep people protected. That's really all I wanted to show you in terms of where we are overall since 2020. If you go to the next one, you can flip through quickly. And that's just really to show you what we were experiencing in the current wave. This is in 2020 in our 7-day positivity. Let's keep going. Sorry, you're just going to see the down. This is to show you the down slope. This is the number of people who had positive COVID infections and were in COVID housing. You can see again with the peaks going down, and we're hoping to maintain that. And the next slide is just to show you the quarantined exposed population also following a similar trend where we peaked. Again, we could not have contained the virus without the protocols that we had in place and the work that we did in partnership with the department, really cohorting and patient movement and control of movement and quarantine and bringing people for health services and testing and vaccinations were key. So that's really what I wanted to share. Thanks for showing that.
Thank you. So now we will turn to the other items on the agenda. And going back to the one at the top, our first topic is about the health triage line and getting an update about that. If you could explain more to us about how the initial triage process by the nursing staff works and how you coordinate between the different facility clinics, what kinds of trends you're seeing across facilities, sort of a more facility-specific look at how the clinics are operating. Two of our board members visited GRVC following the last board meeting and before this one, and spoke to clinic staff and spent quite a bit of time in the clinic. And that experience, I think, raised a lot of questions for them. And it would be great to have a more, like, a deeper dive into how the health triage line works.
Sure. Before I hand it over, just to remind folks that the health triage line is a service that CHS created and established. We started planning this a few years even before COVID and launched it before COVID really hit us. It became invaluable during the COVID time, the last few years, and it's grown. The intention there was to establish for the first time, and it is successful, a pathway directly for our patients to reach us without having to rely on an increased demand on the department to bring people to us. So people can call and speak with our nurses who can triage the request or the complaint or answer questions over the telephone or handle it remotely or administratively if it can be, or to request and add them to the list of people who at least by triage on the phone, we think we should see. Ms. Nancy Arias, who's our Chief Nursing Officer for Correctional Health Services, it's really her service that she's run. She did a presentation to the board in October. I hope everyone remembers that, and I think she can go into greater depth as you can now request it. So I'm going to stop talking. Great.
So just a little bit more insight as to the workflow. So as Ms. Yang advised, the nurses triage the phone calls. The nurses coordinate at the facility level the call down list in order to expedite the encounters. The sick call triage nurses are assigned to each of the facilities, and those sick call triage nurses coordinate with the health service administrators and the Department of Corrections to have the patients presented to care, and they then facilitate the encounters directly within the clinic environment. To date, between November 27th and January 26th, the health triage line has answered and or picked up voicemails at 7,342 calls. We've actually screened out through the triage process that we've created closely with our medical service. We've screened out and triaged patients at 54% to be able to get services in real time, collaborating with our MDPAs that work with the sick call triage line, and or the nurses actually coordinating at the facility level, either with pharmacy, dental, and or mental health, making sure that the person's services are rendered in real time during the phone call that's happening with the nurse. 46% of those phone calls are triaged to the point where the nurses, based on our protocols and procedures, schedule the patients out to be seen within the clinic environment. And then those nurses then facilitate those encounters in real time at the facility level. To date, 40% of those patients have been seen and or refused an encounter within 1 day's time. 27% of those patients have been seen or refused an encounter within 2 to 3 days. 15% of those patients have been seen or refused between 4 to 10 days. And or 34% of those patients have not been seen or in less than or equal to 10 days. So success measures based on resolved, referred, sick call, seen or refused. Calls resolved, administratively referred or refused have been, out of our 6,192 calls, has been 86%. Within 0 to 3 days has been 92%. And 100% when you reach out to 10 days. There was somewhat of a breakdown, sick call order type. So we have 3 different types of calls, either they're emergency, must-see, or routine phone calls that have been done at any given time. Are there any questions regarding the data presented or any other further questions or clarifications asked?
So, I mean, I'll just add again, you know, that the calls that patients make from their housing areas, people either reach our nurses directly or leave voicemail. Ms. Arias's staff return every voicemail or take care of it administratively or not. Over half of those calls that we receive are handled without having to bring somebody to clinic just to, you know, do a renewal or a letter or eyeglasses or lotion, whatever the issue is, or to answer questions.
Medications, dental referrals,
Right.
keep referrals. They'll
Right.
want to find out the status of their appointment, whether it's a specialty clinic appointment, a mental health appointment, when their next chronic care appointment.
Right.
If they may be requesting their charts, so we coordinate with the health service administrator to get them down to coordinate getting them their charts. So at least 54% or greater of those are resolved on the phone in real time. And then the 46% end up with having their scheduled routine. Important key point to remember here, there was the question about what happens at the facility level, and I understand there were some questions with the staff at the facility level. The key point here is that the sick call triage nurses are the ones assigned to the facility, and they're the ones facilitating with the health service administrators the service to the patients to make sure that this gets expedited. So I'm not sure who the encounter may have been had with, because you may not have met the sick call triage nurse, but that is the key person who's facilitating these encounters in real time at the facility level. And they're the ones coordinating in the morning with the health service administrator, the Department of Corrections, so that they know that they're arriving at the facility and they'll be taking care of the patients. Their arrival is usually a little bit after 10 o'clock in the morning, because our calls are being managed between 5 a.m. and 10 a.m. in real time. After 10 a.m., the phone calls are going into a voicemail queue, but there's nurses on staff who are picking up the voicemails in real time. And depending upon the triage of those voicemails, they'll also coordinate a must-see real-time appointment, and they'll coordinate that at the facility level with the sick call triage nurse and or the health service administrator or director of nursing at the facility level to make sure those persons get seen in real time. There's a nurse on staff 6 out of the 7 days out of the week in order to manage not only the real-time calls, but also the voicemails, so that at no time there's a lag in time where patients' concerns or requests are being addressed with no more than a 24-hour lag time.
Yeah, I think a question, Amanda, had come up that the 2 board members who interviewed our staff in the clinic they were concerned that the staff in the clinic couldn't explain how the triage entire system works. I think you get a better sense. I hope the board members get a better sense of how many layers and how many steps and how complicated this process can be, and that the people with whom they spoke may have just been, have been the people who are actually in the clinic seeing the patients who at the end of that process have been determined by us to need to be seen and were then brought down to clinic. So it's really the downstream end of that process that I think the board members may have been looking for, so we hope we gave you a larger picture.
And just to let you know that the nursing service owns pretty much the patients once they come into the clinic, so that's really why, you know, if you're not speaking to a nurse in the nursing service who's trying to control the workflow and make sure that the patient gets seen in real time, you may not have the encounter with the correct person and ask the question to the correct person.
Any questions from the board?
I do have a question, and thank you very much for all of the information that you've provided. It's really helpful to have an overview. I guess this is for both CHS and DOC, and I'm interested to hear what sort of systematically, what means of communication and collaboration CHS and DOC have, both at the clinic level and at the facility level and overall. one of the issues talking with folks on the ground that wasn't entirely clear was how communication and collaboration work between CHS and DOC staff to ensure the smooth operations of the clinic and to ensure that all persons who call the triage line and need to be seen are seen, and that there's follow-up and prioritization to ensure that folks are seen in the clinic. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, Chair Thurman. This is Carlos Castellanos. So basically what happens on the ground is this ongoing communication with the DOC staff. Most facilities have a daily huddle where they will discuss, production from the previous date and production for the current date. There's also a weekly meeting with the captains, clinic captains, when there is one available, and then also a wardens meeting where not only production but safety issues are discussed. In terms of production, not only to the health triage or sick call purposes, but every service gets discussed with the DOC staff, including, it could be sick call, it could be, appointments to specialty clinics. So again, this is a daily communication through in-person daily huddles, ward meetings, clinic captains, and again, through central operations where we escalate directly to DOC operations so they can also be aware of what's been going on the ground. And the daily list, and the daily list of people that we need to be presented to the clinic.
Felipe?
Thank you, Patsy. Thank you, everyone, for giving us further details about the process. The question that Jackie and I, and I had when we met with your staff and DOC staff recently is that, is the nurse line the only way to access services? Or if I'm an inmate and I talk to a correctional guard and I want to get services, is that another way of getting to the same kind of services? And on that note, it seems to be that there's more than one pathway to get services, which is good. The question that I have is how you coordinate data. I mean, who's the system of record? I mean, how we know the number of people who want to access services if there's all of these multiple ways to request services?
Hi, Felipe, it's Patsy. Thank you. So yeah, the health triage line, again, is something that Correctional Health Services created as a supplement. It's not required, and it is an additional pathway where people can reach out directly to us. As you said, there are many pathways for patients and providers to meet, either in person or by remote. Beginning at intake, we do assessments on people. We know what their underlying or their acute or chronic needs may be. So patients become known to us, certainly during intake in terms of what their ongoing needs or follow-up needs may be. So we are aware of them and we can call them down for visits and appointments, and we make those for our patients and convey those names to DOC, who presents them to clinic for us or for whatever services. Separately, under the board standards is a requirement on the Department of Correction to maintain sick call, which they continue to maintain, which is at any point in time. A patient may ask to see clinic apart from our asking to see them. They may ask to see us, and they may do so certainly through the officer in their housing area, or any officer where they may be. Again, our health triage line supplements that, which apart from asking DOC, they can also just pick up the phone and call us and get their questions answered or make their requests. Apart from that, there are opportunities where we will be in housing areas or patients will be coming to us, not necessarily for a clinic encounter, but for medications, for nursing visits and checkups, and there's opportunities always there. We have our staff going and meeting with patients for any number of reasons, everything from reentry, preparedness, and discharge planning to group and individual work. At any point in time, people are speaking with our staff and convey questions. Separately, of course, is the access to 311 as well as their own advocates, from whom I think we all hear. And that's another valuable avenue for people. And apart from all of that is obviously, any emergencies or anything else like that where we will respond immediately.
Is there any way that between you and the Department of Corrections keep track of all of those requests to ensure that all of them are met, even though they come from different places?
Depending on which pathway it is, different parts of different agencies will have monitoring of that. Certainly, those patients who we know we want to see, whether it's because we are familiar with that patient's needs that we have determined, or that as a result of the triage line, we've had some conversation, our nurses have had a conversation with the patient and determined that they should come to clinic. We certainly keep track of that. In our therapeutic housing areas, the most numbers of which are our mental health units, and Dr. Sabetti's here. We know who our patients are in those units, in those housing areas, and what their needs are. We separately have patient relations department that keeps track of complaints and requests that come directly to us, either through DOC directly from patients or through their advocates or 311. And I believe that the department keeps its own records.
Thank you. So if we wanted to get a sense of the universe of requests, there will be multiple buckets of places that we need to look at. Thank you.
Bobby?
I just want to re-emphasize Felipe's point. Historically, the CHS did not know who was seeking sick call. They just didn't know. They only knew who was brought to them. Now they know who is requesting sick call, which is a very, very different situation. And you presented us with a lot of data. Some of it was great, and some of it was disconcerting, I think, in terms of the delays in people actually being seen when you think that they should be seen. But I would really appreciate it if the reports about healthcare access include this information. That's a critical part of the healthcare program is direct access, and we have not ever had that kind of information. And I would ask that you, in order to reflect what you're doing, provide that information as part of the healthcare access report. How many people are requesting? How many people you're triaging, elsewhere, and how many people you're seeing, and whether those people come to you or not, if they're brought. We're going to get into the next section, but I'm just going to ask it now. The numbers of refusals are very high, and there was testimony by Chief Presley in court regarding refusals and failures to escort people. Based upon your experience, your clinician's experience, the nurses and doctors and therapists, do you agree with do you think that it's a reasonable assessment or reflection of what's going on in that the refusal rate is as high as the department claims that it is? I have reviewed occasionally specialty care progress by clinic, and generally there are some clinics where everybody refuses, and there are some clinics where most people come, and I believe it's officer related. But I just wonder if you've gotten you have any information based upon your clinicians' assessments, whether people are refusing at the rates that DOC says they are.
So it's Patsy, and I don't think that CHS can speak to DOC's data or the experience of department staff in terms of their interactions with patients and their conversations with patients. We certainly can speak to what we call verified refusals, which is where a patient and a member of our health service has actually had a conversation about whether and why somebody should pursue or see through their visit with us or their treatment or their testing or whatever it is that we're recommending that they do, and they still may refuse, as many of us may choose with our own providers.
Are refusals documented in writing or in video?
Our verified refusals are documented as a clinician-patient conversation.
DOC refusals.
Oh, I see, to see DOC.
I mean, I would think that you would be very interested in what the rate of and the accuracy of the data regarding DOC refusals, because that would reflect patients that you might want to see and that want to see you and you might not be seeing. So if you can't answer it, I'm surprised, but did DOC answer that, whether or not if there is a refusal, there are lots of refusals, that is documented by a signature or on video?
Hi, this is General Counsel Asim Rahman at the department. With respect to refusals for medical service, for example, in the housing unit, these are recorded in our logbooks and, for example, a mandated service logbook. And we are reviewing and looking into the option to supplement that by recording refusals on video. That's something that we're currently assessing. Thank you.
I appreciate your looking into that. I think it'll be very helpful to for the people that you care for.
I have a follow-up question to Bobby's last question and your response about the logbooks. The logbooks are handwritten by the officer, is that correct?
Yes, they're handwritten by the officer and they're reviewed by supervisors, and then they're kept in the facility and undergo further reviews.
Does the inmate review the entry or sign off on the entry?
They do not.
Thank you. So we are into the next section of the agenda, which is rates of clinic utilization by facility. And as we go into it, I did want to reiterate, because I'm not sure we really hit it in the last section, some discussion that's more granular and describes what's going on in particular facilities would be useful. One issue that the board has been wondering about is with the announcement by DOC that 1,000 officers have returned to work. Are the clinics seeing greater utilization? Is there greater escort availability? Is it the same across the system, or are there variables in different facilities, such as the physical layout, that have an effect on that? Is there any communication between the two about syncing up the staffing to meet gaps? And by the two, I mean the two agencies. Thank you.
Good morning again. This is Chief Stoops. Thanks for the question. What we have done as a part of our efforts to ensure that clinics are staffed appropriately, we have designated escort officers assigned solely to the clinic for production. As we've stated, with our staff returning to work, our priority is to increase the number of escorts. The department have other competing issues, but we prioritize this, staffing in the clinic areas, ensure that the clinics are staffed appropriately firsthand and foremost.
And could Correctional Health Services also address the question? It is also directed to you. What are you seeing on the clinical side?
So I would echo what the chief said. I appreciate it. I believe that the department is aware of the priority we are placing on health services and our ability to see our patients. We are at the same time acutely aware of the still ongoing challenges that the department is facing. And so we continue to work, as Mr. Castellanos said earlier, on a daily basis at all levels between the two agencies to make sure that people who need care get the care that they need.
Do the board members have any other questions on this topic?
I just repeat Amanda's question. Amanda asks, is there an improvement in access to escorts to get to the clinic or in clinic operations since there's been a increase in the number of officers, as the commissioner said? Neither of you answered that question.
I think, I'm not intending to frustrate you further, Bobby.
I'm not frustrated.
Well, okay, good. COVID is still here. We're coming out of what was a sudden and pretty big surge just a month ago that has, consumed so much attention in the last 2 years and resources, and devastated resources at the same time. We continue to work really closely as a service ourselves and with the department to try and deal with a situation that's very challenging in the jails. I think everybody just too acutely remembers that last year we hit a low point in the jails. The situation on Rikers and in the jail, in the system altogether, was really bad. The decision collectively to move towards moving and reopening EMTC and did help rebalance some of it, got us a kickstart out of what was a untenable situation. And we've got to keep climbing out of it together and hope that COVID gives us enough time and room to breathe to recuperate and get back on our feet the way I think the rest of the city and everybody else wants to.
Thank you. I wanted to sort of reiterate the idea of getting into what you're seeing in the facilities. The board members have visited AMKC and GRVC recently, and for instance, the physical layout of those two facilities is vastly different. AMKC is much more spread out, and the distances to walk the hallways to get from one place to another are very different than other facilities. GRVC, on the other hand, has a lot of inmates that are held in very secure environments for security reasons, and that are more pronounced than in other facilities. Is there anyone who can speak about what different strategies CHS might be employing in facilities that have unique needs to make sure that the patients are able to get to the clinics that are in each facility?
Hi, this is Carlos. So I think it's important that I'm not surprised by the question. I think GRVC and MKC are very unique and complicated places to manage. I think at MKC, the fact that we have two different clinics, the MO clinic and the GP clinics, and we have a handful of different clinics throughout the jail that were designed to really be able to service the population throughout the different jails. What happens now is, again, depending on the circumstances of the day and staffing resources on the DLC side, we will plan ahead and determine which part of the jail we're going to open up and which part of the jail will remain closed. And, for the most part, if the clinic that is the satellite clinics is closed because there's not enough resources, the plan is to bring everyone into the main clinic throughout the different shifts. We try to spread out the services, not to really focus on the 8 to 4 because there's so many competing interests on that floor. We'll spread out the services throughout the two different shifts so that we can capture as many patients as possible throughout the jail. But again, it's really based off on a day-to-day conversations that takes place. And again, we're in maximizing utilization of these different clinics throughout the jail whenever possible. GRVC is complicated because of all the security protocols in place, but we do have a better workflow where there are clinics that are being used outside from the main clinic, where DOC is able to present patients, and again, the strategy has been not to focus on on one shift per se, but just to spread out services on both tours throughout the day.
Thank you. Do any board members have any further questions on this topic? Then we'll move on to the next section, which has to do with CHS policies that you have in place to handle a couple of difficulties that have been identified to our staff on tours and discussing issues in the facilities. One, again, this shortage of escort officers and how that may be affecting your ability to see the patients, and are there any creative workarounds that might be possible to make sure that your staff can safely get to housing areas if that turns out to be what's necessary. And the other issue is one that was discussed on our tour of GRBC particularly, but more generally, what sort of policies do you have in place, or practices, if it's not a firm policy, but how do the clinic staff deal with the violent patient? And if the clinical staff have refused to interact with a particular person in custody for valid reasons, perhaps they were subjected to some violence in the past, or the patient has a tendency to be violent towards a particular type of a person or something, how do you ensure that those violent patients are actually able to get medical care? And if the practice is to wait for a medical staff who's able to interact with them, how do you prevent that from delaying care?
Yeah, thank you. So the general guidance that we have given to all clinic staff is to remove themselves from situations where a patient might be displaying aggressive behavior, right? And then that becomes a joint practice with DOC when then the person at that point gets removed from the clinic and gets placed in a holding pen until the situation is de-escalated. The plan at that point is to really bring back the patient back into the clinic to be evaluated by the same provider, which at the time could have, by that point, the patient is already calm, or by a different provider. And again, it's, and what we do as the provider involved in the situation is to immediately notify the correctional officer and to notify the supervisor so that we know there's a person that is outside in the holding pen pending to be seen again by a different provider or by the same provider when the situation has been de-escalated.
I think just to add to what Mr. Cassiano said, back in the autumn of 2021, I'm forgetting my years, when the situation in the jails was very bad, it was also bad for the safety and security of our staff. There were serious repercussions. The department, we made the department aware of them. They were aware anyway, took them very seriously. Direct conversations, including Chief Stukes taking his steps and actions, reinforcing with his staff, and allowing us to share that with our staff, the availability of COs to provide extra presence and security, particularly when there is a known situation where we need to see somebody who has some past behavioral issues, that can still be done, so that somebody's clinical needs can be met, but at minimal risk to our staff, given additional attention and security presence by the department. And I don't know if the chief wants to say something about what he's done, but I cede to that.
Thank you, Patsy, for that. Just to add, with some of the steps that we have taken with regards to some of the issues that we have heard from your staff and through our daily discussions, under the purview of Chief Lemon, he had issued a security memorandum due to the recent intakes that had taken place in the clinics. Holding cell areas in the clinics were designated to use to hold restrictive individuals regarding their restrictive status who have engaged in inappropriate behavior or have been known to participate and act violently toward uniform and non-uniform staff. These individuals are escorted to the clinic in full restraint to medical staff for triage, and that those restraints shall remain on at all times. At any time when there's a request for removal of those mechanical restraints, the assistant deputy warden, who is the tour commander commanding the tour, must be notified for approval. We also took our cash unit because there were some issues regarding patients coming into the clinic and walking around freely without being properly supervised. Steps taken to address those issues were members of the cash unit were instructed to monitor the facility clinic in our major 4 facilities. The steps with regards to that monitoring is those staff members are required to notify the facility staff when they observe persons walking in the clinic for immediate and real-time abatement.
Do any board members have any more questions on that topic? So the next topic on the agenda, we would like you to address what you're seeing in terms of your own healthcare staff. 2 years into this crisis, we know that healthcare staff everywhere are hurting, and we'd like to know whether this is affecting attrition with your staff. What is the state of your healthcare staffing? Are you seeing turnover? Is it affecting your operations?
So thanks for that concern and question. Yes, I think like everywhere else, healthcare workers have been affected. All essential workers have been affected really by COVID. It's messed up a lot of people's lives. And it has affected our ability to retain people. We have seen a slight increase in terms of a slight increase. We have seen increases in resignations, retirements, reluctance to sign on in particular areas. Some areas like in nursing, where we've had the ability to pull on agency staff to help fill in some of the gaps. Other areas and disciplines and professions, such as in mental health, where there's been significant impact, the ability to have temporary folks is less so. But the health service, correctional health services, we have managed, we have done workarounds, we've rolled out all manner of other alternative ways to keep care going, including remote and different shifts and requirements. And I think overall we've managed remarkably, and I think that it's just purely a testament to the commitment and the dedication and the courage of the staff of Correctional Health Services.
Thank you. Are there any board questions on that topic? So then we will move on to the final topic, since you started with the COVID update, which we appreciate. The final topic is addressed both to DOC and CHS. And the board is deeply concerned about the number of deaths in custody that we have seen. And also very concerned about the suicide rates of late. And so we would like both agencies to address this topic, and perhaps start with describing what you are working on now to mitigate this risk and prevent these deaths and suicides from happening.
Good morning. Just to respond to your question, the department takes the death of anyone in custody extremely seriously and works in partnership with our partners at Correctional Health Services to review incidents and make necessary changes. As the commissioner and the leader of the department, my condolences and this department's condolences go out to the families of those that have passed away. Please know that we take the death of anyone in custody extremely seriously and always review the circumstances surrounding the death in order to understand it and make necessary changes. We work collaboratively with CHS to ensure that all people in custody receive access to care. We want to make sure we have regular periodic reviews and that happen jointly with CHS to ensure that we are working together to maintain an environment that is safe and supports the well-being of people in custody. The board, as you know, is provided with all documents related to death in custody within a week of the death, and will continue to respond quickly that way.
Correctional Health Services?
Not sure what's it. Correctional Health Services, we're working with the department to make sure that people who we need to see are seen. I think we've talked about this in prior meetings with the board. I think, one of the environment of the jails is a critical contributing factor. And I think we're all aware of what most of this conversation has been about, what the department has been facing and attempting to do and working to do to shore up what the circumstances are in the jails, so that the environment and the opportunities for intentional or unanticipated outcomes are minimal.
Bobby?
Yes, I wish I could have heard more. Maybe there is more to hear from the department and CHS. So what you have done differently over the since a year, over the past year or so. Death is a clinical outcome. It is not an administrative outcome. And Commissioner, I know that you're hopeful that the DOC and CHS review these deaths together, but it is my understanding, based upon discussions with CHS and DOC, that the discussions that are held following the death do not involve any of the clinical information that CHS has, and they believe that they have. I don't know why. Actually, this is a process which is unlike any in the country, and I've reviewed mortality reviews from hundreds of jails and prisons, and I've never ever seen a correctional health service take the position that what the clinical aspects of the death are not a part of the evaluation of the death. So I urge the department to require that kind of conversation with CHS going forward. The absence of it, essentially CHS says it's all your fault because it's just the conditions in the jail that do it, and it's not their fault because previously the CHS has described sort of the impetuous behavior of people who kill themselves, rather than view their clinical status as well as their cage status. So I would hope that going forward there will be some changes in the process of death review, and that will result in fewer suicides and fewer deaths.
Okay, so this is Patsy Yang. I need to respond to that, Bobby.
Sure.
I do not recall the CHS calling or characterizing the deaths as impetuous. I want to clarify that we absolutely review the clinical management, through course treatment, every aspect of care that we provided in not only every death, but also mortality in morbidity cases. We do our in-depth reviews, we do them timely, we do them thoroughly. We address them whether they're systemic or whether they are an individual provider, whether it was an error, whether it was an opportunity for education. We take corrective actions. We are part of health and hospitals as well. We go through our own internal quality review and improvement and assurance, which M&M is even just a separate part of it. And one of I am a bit really taken aback that you would have characterized our handling of our patients in that manner. But I will go on to say that I think we are unique in that when we came over to health and hospitals, I created something called the JAR. You've heard of this before. We've talked about it before. It's the Joint Assessment and Review. That I think is unique, at least it was when we created it back in 2016, where we go through a review of every significant incident, whether it was a death or a near death or a miss or just a bad outcome or potentially avoidable outcome. And the department does its review as well. And together we come with our findings to share within what is appropriate and what is relevant to identify together opportunities that the two agencies together can put into place as corrective actions to minimize the likelihood of a recurrence of anything like that. That I think is unique. That does not necessarily involve the clinical information that may or may not be relevant to the incident at hand. But there is in-depth review by each, certainly by CHS and I presume by DOC, and together we could do we do a review. And I should just stop there.
Patsy, I didn't question the internal review of CHS with H+H. I raised the question about your providing clinical information to the department so that your joint mortality reviews would be in line with what people expect of a mortality review, which would include clinical information that the department would have access to and could assess with you strengths and failures.
Bobby, I just want to, and we don't have to agree on this, but I want to reassure you that the process that we've put in place allows us to meticulously and thoroughly assess the clinical care factors that contribute to any adverse event, and also to work with our partners in DOC to address the elements of those events that bear on the security environment. And the sharing of clinical information in those meetings is not required to address both of those components. And I could speak to many years of engaging in this work, which I think has very successfully driven down the rates of death in this system. Obviously, things changed across the country after COVID, and we've seen destabilization and increased rates of death, particularly suicides and overdoses, in correctional facilities across the country, which are related to the environment of care and the struggles that we've been talking about for years in this meeting. But I have to assure you that the process allows us to address the root causes that contribute to both the clinical and security aspects of adverse events.
Are there any further board questions or follow-up questions?
Amanda, just let me briefly just, any death is just so significant, as we all know. And I don't know, visiting Rikers, seeing some of the work that's being done, looking at the medical care, I mean, I don't know, maybe this is just a comment. This isn't about finger pointing. This is about how we get better and how do we become more effective as a team and collaborate to make certain that no more deaths happen. And I think this is just, my position when I think about this. I think, it can't become commonplace where we talk about death as, okay, it's part of being in prison, or if it's just part of the process, or it's part of COVID, or it's a culture. It's important that, and I know we all are doing our best that we can. So I'm just echoing my own sentiments when we talk about someone's life being lost in a jail cell alone, without family or without anyone else around them. And I know we all care about people and how we go about that. So I guess it's just, how do we continue to improve on a system that sometimes has failed some people who are on the margins and are trying to figure out life. So I hope as we move forward in these meetings, we can come up with more effective solutions and continue to work with one another to make certain that no other life could be lost. So thank you, and thank you, Amanda.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. It's Patsy again. I just, every single patient in custody is one of our patients. We exist to take care of them while they are in the custody of the city for whatever circumstances led them there. Anything that happens to them that's bad is devastating to us. We are responsible for their health care and their lives, right? We leave no stone unturned, examining ourselves harder than anybody else can for what we have done, what we could have done. Was there anything that we missed? We do that internally and with absolute frankness and honesty. We take the additional step of working with the department, equally self-reflective, to share together what we can do and what we can do better. Every single person counts, matters tremendously. It is not taken in all lightly. We don't brush over things. We literally torture ourselves trying to figure out what happened, and it stays with us forever. And the board has now the authority, without even going to court, and we supported that law, to get the information that you want. You have the authority to call death reviews with both departments. I don't recall the last time you had one, but perhaps that would be informational to you to understand what might have happened in each of those cases of which you speak. Certainly, we've done our reviews, and you have not called those death reviews, where it would give an opportunity for the board members to understand what the two departments have done and seen. And I would just leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you, Patsy.
If I could just, Amanda, so Chairman Medina, I agree with everything that you said. I think if we as a department are going to be a learning organization and learn from incidents that's happened, it's important for us to vitally communicate with CHS. And I can tell you, while I've only been here a short time, I've had multiple conversations with Patsy and other members of her team to communicate how we can learn from things and do better. And they are a really vital partner in our evolution to really have the best system we can in the country. So I echo, you have my commitment to do that. And I've been it really has been a strong relationship that Patsy and I have been building together.
That is very good to hear, and thank you for that as well. And as you rightly point out, we have a role in investigating all deaths that happen in custody, and they are all currently under investigation and by us as well. And we literally look forward to working with you. I know there have been a number of requests for documents, and we have more. And we will be reaching out to you with our new director level position that is looking specifically into deaths. And we look forward to working with you too. And I think we all work together as a team to figure out how to do things better. Are there any other board follow-up questions in this section of the agenda?
So if not, definitely want to. So thank you all. Thank you for this opportunity. I want to thank CHS for the presentation. I want to thank DLC. I want to thank everyone just for your commitment as we move forward and just changing the narrative around Rikers and our people that are incarcerated there. So thank you all for this opportunity. I want to move now into the public comment section. And as we move into the public comment session, I have a list of speakers who signed up to speak. I'm going to call every person's name. When you hear your name, please raise your hand using the hand icon below the participants list on your webcam screen. If you don't see the list, I want to click the menu on the bottom of your screen. Once you open your list, you see an icon, raise your hand. When you raise your hand, we will unmute you and you will be able to turn on your video. You'll then begin your public comment. We usually have 3 minutes. And I am here to listen, as well as the board is here to listen. Also, the board welcomes you for written comments. You can email written comments to boc.nyc.gov. Okay, so again, email written comments to boc@boc.nyc.gov. Or you can mail them to 2 Lafayette Street, 12th floor, room 1221, New York, 10007. With that said, I'd like to call on the first speaker. If I mispronounce your name, please work with me. So Daniel Gerard. Again, Daniel Gerard. I think there's a Daniel.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
No, that's okay. I was having technical malfunctions.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all the presentations. I just had a couple of questions, mainly so that those of us who are listening in and for the board to continue to exercise its oversight. It would be great if whenever you have these hearings, if the Department of Correction could please present data regarding everything, regarding whether the young adults are getting programming, how many kids are participating in the programming, how many kids are participating in education, what are the daily numbers over the previous several weeks, so that we have a realistic sense of what the kids are actually getting access to. In addition, the presentation on RMAS was a little bit confusing. The last time we saw drawings for RMAS, there was no congregate care involved. There was no real out of cell time. And so the status of RMAS is a little bit confusing at this point. As you know, we often advocate for 14 hours out of cell time, and that doesn't mean walking into a room or a barbed wire that's right in front of your own cell. And so it would be great to know what's actually happening with that and how the people who were beginning construction on these units, have they all been switched off to doing something else? In addition, to call the hunger strike collective grievance is Orwellian, to say the least. We personally would have wanted to hear more about that. I neglected to mention that I'm a senior staff attorney at Children's Rights, and I often testify before the board, so I apologize for not identifying myself first. We do impact litigation on behalf of kids in foster care and juvenile justice systems, and our clients are often represented in juvenile facilities across the country and adult facilities as well. In any event, I also would have wanted to know how many of the unstaffed posts are available for the kids in RNDC, and in YA housing in general. And in addition, it would be great to know when this staffing analysis is going to be done by Nunez. I'm not quite sure why that information wasn't available today. And so we just need to hear more detail. This is an opportunity for the public to be elucidated about what's going on at the DOC. So thank you very much for calling on me.
Thank you. I'll get to my next speaker, Robert Camacho.
I don't see Robert Camacho.
Okay. We'll go to Christine Brown. Christine Brown.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Good morning. My name is Kristen Brown, and my colleague Fleming Smith will be speaking after me. We're legal interns with the Urban Justice Center's Mental Health Project, and we're here to share a testimony from a person recently incarcerated at Rikers. This testimony includes discussions of self-harm. It's been 7 months since I've been given any of the medication that I need. On the outside, I took it every day. AMKC has not given me my medication, period. Growing up, I had trouble with reading and writing at school. My parents divorced when I was really young, and at age 15, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Until 2008, I was often in and out of the hospital. I struggled with addiction, and when my mom and my grandfather passed away from COVID-19, I started using again. I had trouble getting my medication from the day that I was arrested. When they transferred me from EMTC to AMKC, they gave me my medication for 4 or 5 days and then nothing. At first, I couldn't sleep. Since then, I've gained 60 pounds. It gets terrible. It gets so much worse than you'd expect. I had a gentleman that tried to commit suicide in my dorm for the simple reason that they don't give us medication. When I was in EMTC, I had a lot of suicide attempts. I tried to finish myself. Doctors would come and talk to me, and officers would watch me, but there was no help after that. They don't take anything seriously. They don't give us a reason for stopping the medication. The only reason that they give us is the following: we're short on staff. That's the only answer we've been given all of this time. I had COVID symptoms 2.5 months ago. They didn't care. We had no masks. We were sleeping in a dorm with 50 people, sleeping 2 feet away from each other. Sometimes we'd have to use towels as masks. You have people coughing on top of you, you have people sneezing on top of you, and you have people going crazy on top of you. They didn't really care. They don't help us with medical attention or nothing. The only help I got was from other people in my dorm. Without them, I would have been another number on the COVID-19 death list. And now I'll pass it over to Fleming, who's speaking after me.
Thank you, Kristen.
I just wanted to interrupt and remind Kristen Brown and her colleagues at the Urban Justice Center that when you have specific inmates with problems like that, please do reach out to us so that our staff can talk to them too.
Thank you. I will continue the testimony. This here is the worst out of the worst place that anybody could be in. We don't go out to the yard. We don't get gym. We don't get anything. Once we found a mouse inside a mashed potato. Another time there were cockroaches inside bags of potato chips that we bought from the commissary. That's the food we have to eat. There's no toilet tissue. They tell us, do what you have to do, but there's no toilet tissue here. Staff here is very poor, to the point where they might see inmates fighting other inmates and not get involved. This is the worst jail in New York City. No one cares about anybody. Here, you have to learn about surviving on your own. It's like being in the desert. We want people just to know that we're human beings, not just a dog out here where they say, we forgot about this person. Once I get upstate, it's different. They provide us better medication, better quality of services. Here, we need better staff, better training for them. There needs to be an emphasis on mental health. Since May, I haven't received any treatment. I filed a grievance, but I never got a response. They only really respond if people incarcerated are aggressive or violent against guards. Everybody's been trying. My family's been trying. I've been trying. I've been trying to write letters to everybody, to write and write and write. I was recently sentenced to 5 years in state prison. At my hearing, I told the judge about the situation with my medication. At the bottom of the form, she wrote a note and signed it saying I should be getting my medication. Nothing changed. They didn't even respond to that. We want somebody to help us and hear our voices, to make ourselves understandable. We don't want to just be left behind. We're just praying every day that there's somebody trying to help us out here, trying to hear our voices. This ends the testimony. Thank you for listening. I yield my time.
Thank you, Fleming. Got brother Five. Where you at, Five?
I do not see. I don't think they're on.
Okay. We'll move right to Arlene Adams.
Also not on.
Right. What about BB Suarez?
Nope. Sorry.
Okay. That leaves us with Kayla Simpson.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Good morning. My name is Kayla Simpson. I'm a staff attorney at the Legal Aid Society's Prisoners' Rights Project. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. First, RMAS. The delay in RMAS implementation has centered on location of RMAS units. And of course, that's a critical conversation. The inhumanity of isolation is tied to the physical realities of the space. But the board's restrictive housing rule was about so much more than the physical space where we put people. And the new minimum standards aim to solve some of those serious and systemic problems, like hearings for arbitrary placement in restrictive environments, not just those labeled punitive segregation, with access to legal representation, substantive requirements on out-of-cell time and programming, protections for vulnerable populations, concrete progression requirements for how people move through and out of restrictive housing so they're not just sitting in ESH wondering how to leave, as board staff have reported throughout the years. And all of those components are critical to remedying abusive practices in DOC, and they can happen right now even without a location. The department can and should build better RMAS locations, but that effort does not justify protracted delay of these other protections. It has been over 5 years since the board promised to take up this issue, nearly a year since the rule was proposed, 8 months since it passed, and 3 months since the implementation deadline. The board must demand concrete implementation dates for every single component of minimum standard chapter 6, and please issue notices of violation where the department fails to comply. Next, staffing. It is deeply troubling to us that the department cites the return of 1,000 officers in January without, one, acknowledging that this was correcting for a December absenteeism spike, and that those 1,000 officers just got the agency back to crisis levels that prevailed all fall, publicly reported 1,500 officers out sick. And second, that the measures offered today leave us with serious concern that they can meaningfully address the rampant absentee problem. But the public record about such an alarming governance matter can't be this muddied. The board should obtain and publish staffing data every week from the department. number of staff out sick, including new chronic and long-term sick, number on medically restricted status, number AWOL, number on personal emergency or vacation, number out on leave or out for other reasons, and total number of members of service so we can assess how serious that impact is. Because this agency continues to claim staffing shortages are responsible for the months of denials of basic jail services required by the standards. And you said people in custody are protesting. You've heard what Kristen and Fleming report, and we hear those reports every week too. And just this week, we filed a contempt motion in our Agnew case because by the department's own admission, they can't get people to medical appointments. You know your standards are being violated. We need the board to report on what's happening and issue notices of violation. Don't force people in custody to be the only ones saying it. I have stood in arraignments representing people that judges are considering sending to Rikers. And we talk until we're hoarse about what our clients and the press report about conditions in the jail. Judges still set bail and remand as if it's another day. It would be so much more powerful if we could show a judge that an oversight body confirms that their standards, basic conditions of confinement. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Kayla. We got I'm gonna butcher this name, Lasha Mayo.
I don't see Lasha here.
Okay. Josie Henry.
Hi, good morning. My name is Josie Henry, and I'm a social work intern at Brooklyn Defender Services. Today, I would like to shed light on some of the experiences of people placed in restrictive housing, also known as solitary confinement on Rikers Island. As discussed month after month during these BOC meetings, the health and well-being of the incarcerated population throughout the city continues to be of great concern. Despite this, DOC in the city continues to place people in isolation up to 24 hours a day without due process or access to services, exacerbating the burdens they face as a result of their incarceration. This is evident in the case of Mr. J. March will make it a year since Mr. J was first placed in restrictive housing. After 2 months in ESH, Mr. J was assaulted by a DOC officer and then placed in punitive segregation without due process. At the end of his sentence, he was transferred back to ESH Level 1, where he was slashed on the neck by another person in the unit, and since then, Mr. J has bounced back around from one form of restrictive housing to another without written or verbal communication from DOC on his charges, length of punishment, or an opportunity to progress back into general population. Mr. J's experience is not unique and an experience our office continues to hear with more frequency. DOC fails to provide due process. People are left to languish in isolation without information, and DOC continues to operate without accountability. Yet, at the last BOC meeting, Mr. Stephen Kaiser stated, individuals are still provided hearings and the due processes associated with placement into any of our restrictive housing settings. It is clear that what is being said in these meetings by DOC leadership is not what their frontline staff are practicing. To add, Mr. J has provided details of the egregious conditions he and others within the unit have undergone. For example, so little food is provided that of the portions they do receive, many have reported rationing their meals in order to have bites throughout the day. Additionally, showers may not come for weeks at a time, and recreation or out-of-cell time has been non-existent. During the last meeting, Mr. Stanley Richards stated, while our providers haven't been coming in, programming staff have been coming in every single day, engaging people. Based on the accounts of the various people I've met since I've started at Brooklyn Defender Services, I know this is not true. With limited access to phone lines in these units, if they're lucky, days go by before people have the opportunity to engage with another person. As a result, people go to desperate lengths for pleas for help. We at the Brooklyn Defender Services call on the Board of Corrections to issue notices of violation and hold DOC accountable when they so violate your minimum standards. The jails continue to be in crisis, and the people in custody need an oversight body who will hold DOC accountable for the inhumane treatment of incarcerated people. Thank you.
Thank you, Josie. Zakaya Wakena.
Hello, good morning. I'm having trouble turning my video on, so I'll just continue to speak. And everyone can hear me?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Zakaya. I'm a social worker at the Bronx Defenders. I'd first like to address the mention of hunger strikers using commissary. Whether folks were using commissary or not, we must keep at the center the fact that folks were taking action against the conditions on rikers. We cannot forget the why behind the hunger strike. I'd also like to speak to the mention of nutritional guidelines earlier in the meeting. We continue to hear that there is a lack of food choices, specifically healthy food choices. Our inside community members are saying there is one piece of fruit offered a day, and most of the time that fruit is rotten. I'd like to add that people are not getting rec time, as someone else mentioned before. Our client shared with us that since December 17th, he's only had 3 days of rec time. I'd also like to speak to the board's questions regarding healthcare. Clients continue to complain about several severe delays and or complete lack of access to medical care. Specifically, escorts are either not available or simply refusing to take people to clinic. People are not receiving their medications due to lack of escort. Also, despite being told that our inside community has access, there is an ongoing lack of access to the vaccine. We have clients who have been repeatedly asking for the COVID vaccine, and their request is ignored. One client became COVID positive and suffered severe symptoms and is now recovering. This could have been avoided completely, or at the very least, lessened his illness had he been vaccinated at the time of his request, or following the countless advocacy efforts by his legal team. Our clients have reported being told a myriad of things from DOC staff and medical staff. Our advocates have repeatedly requested information about CHS's vaccine policy and procedures, but have yet to receive this information. And moreover, our requests to CHS and DOC legal for COVID house and quarantine unit policies have also been ignored. Misinformation continues to be told to our clients and advocates, making it impossible to remedy issues that arise as a result of non-production to court, counsel visits, and video conferences. People have been left in COVID units even after they are no longer positive, while new community members are brought into the COVID units, so that then resets the quarantine time for those who have already been in the units for days. I'd like to respond to DC Torres's speaking about law library access has resumed. This is not congruent with the experience of our inside community members. Law library access is an ongoing issue for almost 2 years and is especially bad at AMKC. Our client said, quote, people should have the right to fight their cases. The lack of access to law library directly impacts folks' ability to actively fight their cases. And, you know, to sum up, we are cautiously optimistic to hear that 1,000 DOC staff have returned to work. However, to date, many of the issues that predated staffing issues continue to be pervasive throughout the jails. Minimum standards continue to be violated and basic rights ignored. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nakai.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to interrupt one more time and make it clear that the advocates, to the extent you have names of people who are willing to give their names to us, please do reach out to us about these individuals or groups of people after the board meeting and in general before the board meeting, in real time, because we do have access to the jails and can speak to people if we're alerted. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Dr. V?
Can you hear me?
Got you, sis.
I don't even see me. Hold on. Let me see what. Oh, it say preview. Okay, start my video. Peace and blessings, everyone.
Peace.
So, I'm Chaplain Dr. Victoria A. Phillips, also known as Miss V, Dr. V, founder and CEO of Visionary V, long-standing active member of the Jails Action Coalition, Justice for Women Task Force, and many other coalitions for justice. Let me begin by saying every great dream begins with the dreamer. Always remember you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars to change the world. Harriet Tubman said that. So recently, in over a decade, I did not speak on the record twice consecutively. Absence is used to support, to elevate the voice of others, and distinguish good leadership from those who seek accolades. I refuse to allow anyone to define the work I do to make New York City better or make it appear as if I don't have respect for another melanin woman when I do. The narrative must always stay on justice. I would like to acknowledge that the commissioner has put a great effort to get the officers of about close to 1,100 to return. And I say that because I personally know how many officers were actually preparing to go on strike before he actually came. So then he turned around and he made a department-wide historical move for those re-entering society to give back in real time after a year upon re-entry. I don't think people know how important that move is that he just made last week. So where there's no vision, the people perish. As co-chair of the New York City Department of Corrections Young Adult Task Force, I'd like to also thank the commissioner for keeping it going with dedication to implementing real consistent changes. Things that should have been done or signed off on last year, he has made sure to follow up on. And I can't just publicly state the wrong without actually coming before this board to state the good for the record. So we have come upon a time where we need collaborative team effort to save our young adults. We can increase morality through consistent programming and initiatives. Now, let me be clear. The same way we as advocates demand that officers and medical staff show up, then please, we must show up as well. Even if there should be another spike, how can programming continue? Who's going to hold the service providers accountable? That's why I'm asking this today on the record. When we speak of accountability, let me be clear. There was an uproar by every advocate across this city as the very nurturers of our communities were bussed up to Bedford, a prison, when the data says that 85% of the women in New York City Department of Corrections have some form of mental health concern. In other words, part of our most vulnerable populations were being sent outside the city, away from family or even their legal teams for the sake of a crisis at Rikers. But I'm confused. Has this crisis ended? The time is now to secure a building off of Rikers Island to transfer the women and connect them directly to receive the resources that should be accessible to them in the community. And Chair, please let me take 30 seconds to address two things. CHS should have already developed a floating medical team to address people who aren't being brought to them. For many years, I have addressed this issue on the record here and at City Council. So it's no excuse. Yes, DOC has great issues that they need to step up on when it comes to production, but CHS took a vow to do no harm. So when it comes to making sure that patients have medical treatment, they can walk down a corridor and go visit them as well. Let's be clear on that. And the other thing I wanted to detour on is DOE. When the young adults have returned to school, there is no more excuses for young adults to be handed a packet when we pay for instructors to teach them education. So that needs to be addressed as well. And I will finish by saying, Frederick Douglass said, they want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Today, I demand justice for all unrighteous in the boat and publicly state that I don't think anyone should hold a seat on this board if they cannot regularly visit the very facilities that they sit on this overboard for. Together, we will win. Peace and blessings.
Peace. Thank you, Dr. B. We have Natalie Orienzo. Natalie with us?
Hi, can you see me, hear me okay?
There you go.
All
Got
right,
you.
thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Natalie Fiorenzo, and I'm a corrections specialist at New York County Defender Services. Last month, Christopher Boyle's testimony at this hearing alerted DOC of 200 men in their custody participating in a hunger strike that they did not know anything about. As shown in the beginning of this hearing today, this strike was met with invalidation from DOC, claiming that those involved were eating commissary food, so it wasn't a real hunger strike, when in reality, one of the principal concerns of the strikers was that they did not have access to commissary. DOC also said this morning that conversations were had with detainees and investigations were done to address these concerns, but you will hear in later testimony today that what really took place was brutal retaliation. I will be using the remainder of my time today to share our clients' concerns in their voices in hopes that it sparks some real concern and a thorough investigation. Please let me know if you have issues hearing any of this or if it needs to be louder or softer.
Listen, this is very important. Right now, my unit, we on holy strike. We got over 9 meals. By the time we get this, we'll probably be on 11th to 12th meal. And possibly you contact somebody from community unit right away. And please contact the man's office right away. Let them know that we on holy strike and we have a list of reasonable things that we would like to enter so we can, you know what I'm saying, get things rolling, such as go libraries and recreational and mental health service and medical, stuff like that. That we're not being afforded. The basic mandatory minimum and standards for a human being. So we on holy strike. It's over 200 of us. And, you know, just a little help. I'm saying, I appreciate it. I'm diabetic. I'm not being brought down on time. Insulin. I'm being brought down after I eat, which is getting 4 weeks. Glucose and a whole bunch of stuff that's going on and treated unfair on their excuses. They lack staff with me when they got 2 officers, 4 officers in a bubble doing nothing. See the third degree burn on my touchdown. See the medical treatment. Man, she need all in the background is over there right there. If there is a crazy, no one that I really been canceled as well. He's been on his dollars since 2016. 5 years, I haven't seen anything like this before. We've been living under no heat for over a month or so. There's no heat. The guy came here last night and the temperature was 58 degrees, and that's just what he told us. I was supposed to send a bill here 3 times already in literature, and they keep blaming it on COVID, and I'm just saying this jail all this time wasting my life where all this going on. This is crazy, and I hope you guys can help. If you gotta be in, there's no rent, put me in a COVID house, and everybody's on quarantine here, COVID negative. I need help. Need help. It's not right what's going on here. We really need help in here. Please, do something.
Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Natalie. We have Christopher Boyle.
Okay. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Christopher Boyle. I am the Director of Data Research and Policy at New York County Defender Services. I did testify at the last hearing talking about the hunger strike we had received a phone call over the weekend of July 7th that the hunger strike had started. I had visited with one of the gentlemen that was on the audio that you just heard on that following Monday. By Tuesday or early Wednesday, the information was in the press. So it was obvious that the client who I spoke with, was named in the Daily News articles and some of the other articles. I went to visit the client sometime. I went to go visit the client sometime around Thursday of that same week. There was a rally at Rikers. After we had the rally, I went to go visit him. I learned when I got to Rikers that he, lo and behold, had been moved from RNDC to GRVC. Now, GRVC, I've been told by many, many detainees that it was much more violent than it was than RNDC. The way they've structured GRVC is that they've put gangs all in the same units. This is obviously where Fight Night was happening, which is we obtained that video. And so when I went to go visit this gentleman, he explained to me that indeed it was a much more violent place. He didn't know exactly why he had been transferred to the other facility. He was told on Wednesday, the previous day, that he was being moved because he was too influential. So he was taken out of out of RNDC, sent to GRVC. I went to see him at GRVC and I was concerned for him. So I said, look, call me every day. Let me know how you're doing each day, because I'm concerned that they've moved you in just a couple of days. They clearly have targeted you in some way. I didn't hear from him on that Friday, but I did hear from him on the Saturday. And on the Saturday, he and I spoke and he had been moved to the boat. So now he was in BCBC. So in less than a week, he had been from RNDC to GRVC, and then he was moved to the boat. He explained a pretty horrifying event, which was after I had seen him at GRVC, he was taken back to the dormitory, whereupon the officer in the bubble screamed into the dormitory, "Here's your snitch back." He was then beaten by the other detainees inside the dormitory. They then, corrections department went in and got him out sometime after he was beaten. They put him in GRVC intake for about 24 hours, and then he was moved to the boat area. So while this was happening, Jumaane Williams had gone to visit Rikers Island. I believe it was either that Wednesday or Thursday. And he had a Facebook interaction with constituents. And he spoke about a term I hadn't heard before, even though I've been in the system almost 30 years, this thing called a world tour that apparently the Department of Corrections sends detainees on when they do something they don't like. And this is exactly what happened to this particular client. So he was sent from RNDC, GRVC, then he was sent to the boat. After I spoke to him on that Saturday, I went to go see him at the boat on Sunday morning. When I got to see him on Sunday morning, his eye was completely blackened and bloodshot. So all the blood vessels had popped out of his eye, and it was all completely red. He had a gash in the middle of his forehead, and he explained to me what had happened to him. Now, all that week, I had began to receive messages from other clients on RNDC that were part of the hunger strike, talking about the fact that soon after Mr. Williams had left the facility, they targeted the people who spoke to Mr. Williams. And so they went in, they tossed everybody's jail cells. They began to take merchandise from them, their underwear, socks, T-shirts, really, really, really petty stuff. And so when I'm then asked by the board, give us specific names, I say to you, have you all lost your mind? Am I going to give a name of somebody now after a client names himself in the hunger strike and he's retaliated against and nobody takes any action? This was all in the newspapers over the last few weeks, this retaliation, and nobody's done anything. And on top of that, when I went to GRVC to see him that Thursday, when I walked in, I was told, you can't see him. He is in a COVID unit now. As far as I knew, he didn't have COVID. He wasn't tested for it. I knew nothing of it. So I told him and I said, you know what? I've had COVID. I've been boosted. I ain't leaving till I see him.
Hey,
that you
Christopher,
walk through. Yes, go ahead.
don't mean to cut you off, brother. You had about 5 minutes now. If anything you want to just kind of wrap it up and then send us any info you may have as well?
I'll send you info, but my concern is that I've been to GRBC recently and I've been told that a client refused. It was a client that was in enhanced segregation where they need 3 people to walk them around. And I asked for proof of the refusal and I'm told I can't get anything. I wanted a signature from the client that a refusal happened and no one tells me anything. So this idea that there are sufficient officers to walk people around, I just don't think is true. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Just on the issue of letting the board know about individual people I understand why you don't want to do that, but I do want to reiterate that we do have the capacity to keep a name confidential. We are concerned about retaliation. That's been the practice of the board as far as I know it for quite a long time. We are not the same agency as DOC. And I do hope that people would feel comfortable letting us know, at least the housing area, where a problem is happening, if not the name, so that our staff can go there and try and talk to inmates. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker was Ashaki Antoine. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Can you see me and hear me?
Got you now. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Asaki Antoine, and I am the first citywide trustee of the Corrections Officers Benevolent Association. For the past year, I have raised several concerns, including the continued physical assaults on correctional officers, which has often resulted in officers sustaining broken eye sockets and broken noses, incidents where feces and urine are thrown in our faces. Every day, inmates are throwing scalding hot water from the institutional hot pots on correctional officers and inmates, resulting in serious physical injuries. Another paramount concern is the steady increase of sexual assaults and daily sexual harassment against our female and, in some cases, male correctional officers. At no time have we requested statistics on how many violent inmates were held accountable for seriously injuring correctional officers or other nonviolent inmates. Every public BOC meeting held over the past year has been exclusively focused on the interests of the inmate population. At last month's meeting, a few of you board members inquired about the inmates missing meals, yet you completely disregarded our complaints over the past several months concerning officers working triple tours without being afforded a meal. Disciplining correctional officers appears to be one of your highest priorities, yet you fail to address the countless crimes committed by the inmates and the weapons displayed, which are all captured on Gentech video daily. The double standard, once again, illustrates your selective activism. On January 14, 2022, I sent the entire BOC board via email a photo of a correctional officer with his uniform soiled, what appeared to be feces after he was splashed by an inmate. None of you answered my email. Your silence can never be misquoted. Our working conditions are horrific. We are overworked, injured, fought through the height of the pandemic, 3 different strains to be exact, risking our own health to provide services for the inmates, working 24 hours straight, no food, no water, no communication with our loved ones, and yet you blame correctional officers for the mismanagement the department creating. That is the true definition of torture. This is what needs to happen to improve the working conditions in the facilities. Dismantling of housing inmates by gang affiliation, repair of all inoperable cells and gates in the housing area, and swift accountability and appropriate discipline for inmates who commit additional crimes on correctional officers and non-violent inmates while detained. In closing, my hope is that you take the current conditions in the jails, including the safety for everyone, not just inmates, but correctional officers as well, seriously. I implore you to stand true to the goals as to why this oversight committee was formed, which is making the environment safe and more humane for everyone and ensuring the security of the jails are not compromised. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have Kelsey Diavila.
Morning, everyone, or afternoon. Hello, my name is Kelsey Diavila. I'm the project director of jail services at Brooklyn Defenders. And thank you for today's meeting. And I do want to thank CHS for their presentation about their triage line. I found it helpful, and I do appreciate their willingness to share data. But to echo Dr. Cohen, I hope CHS will include these data points in their public reporting on a regular basis, because at the last meeting in January, Dr. Cohen shared that the board received complaints from people in custody about the hotline and reported how board staff witnessed people calling the hotline with no answer. And CHS leadership responded that they weren't aware of such complaints. It does concern me that CHS leadership is unaware of complaints related to their hotline, because Brooklyn Defenders has notified CHS on numerous occasions of people calling the hotline for weeks with either not getting a nurse on the line or learning they were never put on the CHS call down list after leaving both voicemails and speaking with staff members. And today, in describing their procedures about meeting patients, they said it's based on, quote, who we think we should see. So if CHS is not seeing everyone who is requesting care, then BDS is concerned that, one, healthcare issues might be going unattended, and two, CHS's decision is not being communicated to people in custody, which, as I'm sure we can all understand and even relate to, increases anxiety, builds tension, and creates unnecessary frustration. We recognize at this point the main barrier for people accessing health services is because DOC is failing to provide an escort, which DOC has admitted. But we can't ignore that there are issues in how CHS conducts their hotline for people to request care. I don't doubt that we all want to better the current situation, so I implore CHS to work with the board in addressing these complaints to better understand where the issues lie and how we can quickly resolve problems to ensure people in custody are appropriately cared for. So just to reiterate, we call on CHS to report publicly their data on their triage line, and Brooklyn Defenders welcomes the opportunity to work together with you all as we continue to address the ongoing crisis and ensure people have access to healthcare services in the city's jails. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Cleo Novecki, I know I messed that up.
Hello, can you hear me and see me?
We can hear you, we can't see you. There we go.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. My colleagues and I will be reading testimony from an incarcerated person through the Urban Justice Center's mental health project. I am in my mid-20s, and I have been incarcerated on Rikers Island, awaiting trial for nearly 4 years. I spent 9 months last year and several weeks this year in restrictive housing. I've also been in solitary confinement too many times to count, including several periods of more than 30 days each at OBCC and GRBC. I was only 16 when I was first abused by correctional officers and put in solitary confinement on Rikers Island. The conditions in ESH and solitary are dirty and inhumane. I am currently being held in ESH and GRBC. My room is hardly wider than my arm span. I can't even do push-ups because there is no space. Meals are usually late and cold. I'm supposed to get a shower every day, but the COs alternate showers between 2 tiers here, so we receive showers every other day. In solitary, we are allowed 1 hour outside of our cell per day. However, there's no schedule, and the COs decide arbitrarily who gets to go out. In ESH, we get 7 hours out of our cell per day. They alternate tiers to avoid gangs mixing, but if a CO dislikes someone, they will group people who have conflict to incite violence. In ESH, they've started a new practice of invasive strip searches and room searches before you can go into the yard or day room. When they search a room, they take away your food. Most people don't want to get their things searched and thrown around, so they stay inside and don't get to go into the common areas. In OBCC, they did intense and frequent strip searches, which is why I asked to get transferred to another facility and ended up here. Handling my mental health is really hard here, especially when I'm in solitary. I feel less in control of my emotions, less social, angrier, and I struggle to sleep. Calls are limited to 15 and 6 minutes per day in the box, so there's not enough time to talk to my lawyer or family. My girlfriend left me when I was in solitary because she was frustrated that we couldn't talk. When I was in the mental health wing, I had some access to counseling, but people smeared feces on the walls there. In solitary, I didn't have any counseling. I've probably seen a mental health provider here about 5 to 10 times total. They have been giving me Benadryl, melatonin, and some kind of yellow psychiatric medication. I've also been introduced to very addictive drugs here, and I've been experiencing withdrawal. They make it hard to sleep and make me sweat and go to the bathroom all the time. My colleague Sonia will proceed.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to continue the testimony. The medical care here is inadequate. I've received no follow-ups or treatment for over a year since a doctor here diagnosed me with high blood pressure and another medical issue. Previously, I had a cut on my face and the doctor looked at it through scratched glass and provided an incorrect diagnosis. 2 weeks later, I had to feign another illness to get a proper exam, and only then did I find out it was a bacterial infection. My life is controlled by the COs, and they can do whatever they want. They don't face consequences for abusing inmates unless someone's dead or can't move. They punish us arbitrarily. Even if something happens outside your cell without your involvement, they may punish you and leave you in your cell for over 24 hours. COs are supposed to have body cameras, but they don't always use them. The COs allow people to fight as long as you're off camera, and they won't interfere unless it's too serious. When I was a teenager at RNDC, one CO punched me in the face. Another CO slapped herself in the face and claimed I had slapped her, then detained me and put me in solitary for 120 days. A few years ago, I was on a call with my lawyer when all my belongings were moved without notice from one cell to another. When I told them I was upset, the COs put me in a stretcher and then pushed it the wrong way, banging my head and feet into the wall. Then they left me alone in a cell with no toilet, no bed, and no blanket all night, and left me shackled for a full week. I felt like I was losing my mind there. With the horrible smell and no sleep, I didn't feel like myself. When I was at AMKC last year, the COs were ignoring my requests to speak with my attorney. They would start the calls so late that I could only talk to my lawyer for 5 minutes. One CO acted like she was going to stab me with her pen, so I tried to walk away, and she started punching me. They consequently sent me to solitary for 30 days without a hearing, and I was sent to ESH after that, and have been there and in solitary ever since, except for spending a few weeks in the infirmary after I was slashed in my face and neck. I have not received a single hearing in over 2 years, despite spending more than 9 months in restrictive housing and several 30-day periods in solitary confinement. The COs falsely claimed that I refused a hearing. Once you've been confined, they often won't give you a hearing unless you're strip searched first. Ashley will continue. And she's having trouble unmuting herself as well, if someone could do that.
Well, here and see me. I'll continue. I don't feel safe here. GRVC isn't taking precautions to keep people from getting COVID. COs are often unmasked, They don't provide us with any cleaning supplies. We only get masks when we are in places where masks are mandatory, such as the clinic and court, or around superiors so the COs don't look bad. People here aren't taking COVID vaccines because they don't provide us with any information about their risks or side effects. The housing area next door to us is supposed to be for quarantine. I'm not sure if the CDC is short on space, but for some reason, people are still out in our common spaces. There is no distancing, and many people are unmasked. 2 people who just tested positive after being sick for a while, yet have been staying in the housing area and cooking in the same area as everyone else. I have not been feeling like myself and was tested for COVID, but haven't gotten my results for over 2 weeks. They are not following the requirement that sanitation workers clean the cells between occupants, especially during COVID. No one wants to do it, and they are not assigning those jobs now. Garbage is piling up in the housing unit due to staff shortages. While in punitive segregation, I have seen one of the changes Rikers claims to have added with the new risk management accountability system. I've heard that 15 days in punitive segregation was the maximum, but the captain said that Eric Adams doesn't care, and he wants to make the box how it used to be so people can be forced to stay in there much longer. There has been no change in people's attitudes with the shorter times in the box. Because there is now a 30-day maximum, the COs are giving out 30-day solitary confinement punishment regardless of how serious the person's behavior. A lot needs to change in New York City jails. There should be access to legal advice concerning CO on inmate violence. The restrictions on things like food and showers in solitary confinement should also end. There should be better food options as well as visitation rights and more freedom for those who have not been found guilty.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Ariel Pichado. I believe that's the final name I have here. Ariel Pichado.
We've submitted the request to unmute. Ariel, are you able to unmute and join by camera? Okay, I think we can move on.
All right. So thank you. The meeting is adjourned. The board's next public meeting is scheduled for March 8th at 9 a.m. We will provide meeting details on our website, and we will send an email to interested parties without objection. The meeting is now adjourned. How'd I do? How'd I do? Thank you. Thank you.